Superintendent Jones?
Oh, yes, ma'am. It's okay with me if it's okay with you.
Yes, this sounds great. Do we need to read a statement that this is being streamed live, or is that only for full board?
I thought that was only for full board, but I don't know.
It is. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's only for full
only
board.
for full board now. Yeah.
Okay, super. Well, let's get started then. Can we have our, oh, I just got kicked out. Can we have each of our board members introduce themselves quickly? Member Bogus, you're in the top left hand of my screen, so we'll start with you.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Christina Bogus. I represent Taylorsville, West Jordan, Kearns, and a small slice of West Valley City here in the Greater Salt Lake landscape.
Great. Thank you. Member Straight.
Yes, Brent Straight. I represent Northern Davis County and South Weber County.
Okay. I don't see Chair Moss on here, but I see Chair Norton. Chair Norton.
One ready to be closed.
Christine Norton, representing District 15 from Southern Utah.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any public comment today? It looks
Yes.
like,
Yep.
oh, no,
Go ahead.
not till later.
No, right now, ma'am, we do. Yes, go
Okay.
ahead. Mr. Blaine for the school land trust funds, item 1.2.
Morning, committee. Thank you for this opportunity. You're going to be considering the resolution regarding the trust lands. Trust lands provide a great benefit to the school children of the state of Utah. The school children are the primary beneficiary of the trust lands. There are several, over 10 beneficiaries to the trust, but the school children are over 90%, receive over 90% of the proceeds from the trust. I am your educator representative to the Trust Land Advisory Committee and wanted to speak today on this resolution. It is a slightly revamped or updated resolution to one that you have had in the past supporting the trust lands and the proceeds benefiting the school children of the state of Utah. I feel it is very important to have this position as a state board and coming out of this committee because it shows your commitment to the non-political nature of the trust. Over the years, there have been attempts to erode some of the ability for the trust and the agencies who manage the trust, whether it be the lands or the funds or the benefit or helping the beneficiaries of the trust maintain the integrity of their stewardships. So I would encourage you to approve this resolution to maintain your commitment to this very important benefit for the school children of the state of Utah. If you know anything about the history, we have gone from a very small amount of money in the permanent fund to today being at least $3.2 billion now in the permanent fund that is earning now or kicking off, however you want to phrase it, over $100 million going directly to schools to address their most pressing academic needs. And it's a unique system that is the envy of many other states where parents are directly involved with educators in determining programs that will address these academic needs in the schools. So it is a unique program. It is a very good program. It's a program that goes straight to where the parents and the educators can decide how to address those academic needs. So thank you for your time today. And please address this resolution in a very positive way. Thank you.
Thank you, Coordinator Blaine. Before we move on to Mr. Hauber, I see Chair Moss has joined us. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself, Chair Moss?
Jim Moss, Chair of the State Board. Good to be here. Sorry I'm late.
Great, thank you. So nice to see you this morning. We have Granite School District Business Administrator Todd Hauber. Did you want to speak to us now or? Okay, welcome. You are muted. We can't hear you.
Is that better?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, I'm fighting a cold. It was probably better not to listen to me and just watch me smile, but appreciate the opportunity to talk to the committee this morning. We were given a very special opportunity to respond to the USBE prioritization of funding requests as they go through the legislative process. I can't think of a time where we've been given that opportunity in the past. So we grabbed it and ran with it as fast as we could. We did take that list and we pushed it out to our membership within UASBO. And I probably need to stop and identify myself. I'm Todd Hauber, Business Administrator with Granite School District and the past president with UASBO. So we invited all of our BAs to respond to that priority list that the USBE had put together. And our response came back. I think you have a copy in your packet. I think we pushed it out yesterday late afternoon. So hopefully you have that and can see that. We heard back from 20 of the 21 school districts, from the largest school district down to the small school districts across urban, suburban, rural. So I think out of the 20 that responded, we have a pretty good cross section. And it was very pleasing to see that there was about a 75% overlap as you look at the top 12 items that were prioritized by the USBE and how they came out in the rankings with the UASBO group. So great. I think we're all talking in the same language and we're talking about the important topics. A couple of items that will of note to see there is that 2 items didn't show up on the UASBO listing, and those have to do with infrastructure of the USBE. We typically don't take a position and say whether additional FTE are required or compensation is appropriate for the staffing of the USBE. So that didn't fall out in our system, not as a negative, but just we don't go into that world. And then 2 things that are on the UASBO list that aren't as high on the USBE list have to do with the Vote in a Board Guarantee Program. We would hope to see that higher on the ranking as that impacts more than half the school districts in their funding. And then also the driver education support to be able to provide more funding to cover the cost of those programs. Again, those were higher on the UASBO list. You're talking to BA, so we're talking money and things that we need to run systems, but it didn't hit as high on the USBE list. So that's kind of the quick overview, and hope that's of some value as you go into the legislative session.
Certainly, thank you. And did I hear that you are going to stay in the meeting and speak when we're on some of these other agenda items?
Yes, I've been asked to stay when we get to agenda item 1.3 and we start talking about the minimum school program related to basic recommendations and how to move forward on those ideas from the LFA. Yes, I'll be glad to participate as you see fit.
We'll make sure to get you in. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And we have now from Washington County School District Business Administrator Brent Bills. Oh, sorry. 1 second before we go there, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
But yes, ma'am. Just so the backup or the document that Business Administrator Hauber was referring to is in 1.3 as well. And I'm not sure if Mr. Bills wants to speak to that. So Cami can pull that up so you can see, the public can see what Mr. Hauber was referencing. Cami, can you pull that up real quick? So this is what Mr. Hauber just walked us through, right, is the input from UASBO. And you don't have to necessarily take any action on this. They just wanted to make sure, to his point, to show you. And then if, like next month, if you want this on the agenda to make any kind of recommendations to the board, you can, or, you know, it will be in the backups to the board meeting next month. So, you know, we just wanted to make sure you knew that we were communicating with the field to see, you know, where things are at ahead of the legislative session from their perspective. So we appreciate Business Administrator Hopper doing that. I'm not sure if Mr. Bills, Business Administrator Bills wants to speak to this, but, you know, at your direction, he can. Does Mr. Bills want to speak to this in particular, ma'am?
Sure. If whichever
Yeah.
items he'd like to speak to, yeah, that would be great. Mr. Bills, are you available?
I don't show he's with us.
I didn't see him on earlier either,
Oh,
actually.
I was on earlier. Okay. Well,
Maybe
then,
we
ma'am,
lost him.
right, at your direction, we can go to 1.2, which is the school land trust. And then when we get to 1.3, Mr. Hopper can speak to the related to basics.
That sounds like a great idea.
That's up to you, those things.
Okay, so let's move on to 1.2 then. And this is an action item, and we are looking at the resolution establishing the official position of the Utah State Board of Education regarding school trust lands and funds. And I think we had a review of this on a prior month, it seems like, but were we going to have you, Deputy Superintendent Jones, or Trust Director Paula Plant do a quick summary reminder?
Yes, ma'am. If you'll recognize Director Plan, I think that would be an expedient and more efficient way than me talking to her at this point. So, thank you,
Sounds
ma'am.
great. Yeah, that's just fine. Director Plant, are you available?
I am. Should I go ahead?
Yes, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you have in your backup both a clean copy of the proposed resolution and a copy with some changes that were made to provide updates so that it's consistent with with code and the Constitution and so forth. I'm happy to go through those changes if you would like to be aware of them. This resolution is especially important and pertinent right now because the board supported a resolution in the last legislative session that will put a constitutional amendment on the ballot next fall at this time that deals with moving the fund from the place where it is right now to a place where intergenerational equity is being honored. And we always know that it's a constitutional amendment. It's a bit of a challenge to move forward, to have the voters understand and vote for it. And so the position of the board will be important to us in trying to make that successful. So would you like me to go through the changes, or what would you like me to do?
The changes are the ones that are underlined and in red, correct?
Correct.
So I think they're pretty clear for us to read there. In just a moment, I'm going to have Member Boggess ask a question, but would you like to just highlight, Director Plant, the ones you feel are just what you feel is the most important here?
Certainly. So most of it are really just updates from the past 2 years when you reviewed this the last time. The part that's really important right now are the two references in the last whereas, and also in the second, be it resolved, that speak to the intergenerational equity. And part of that is because the constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot is important, but it's going to take some time for the fund to actually move to the place of intergenerational equity. And it's something they will have to study and do course corrections over time. And we felt like it was important for that to be there. So I think that's the major change.
Okay, thank you. Member Boggess?
Thank you, Vice Chair Vice Chair Davis. I do appreciate it. I have a couple questions. I read in the backup that in the second whereas where it talks about land grant support of common schools, you've got some changes in numbers there. And my question is, what was this just inaccurate data, or did the federal government seize some things? Maybe I just don't understand the change in the numbers. Can someone answer that question for me?
May I?
Yes, please.
So I think the numbers that you're referring to are the acres, and yes, the answer to that question is that we've done some land exchanges. We're in the process of doing a land exchange right now, and sometimes there are internal land exchanges that are not necessarily with the federal government. So these are just updating so the acreages are accurate. The reference to the fund is just updating the growth of the fund since the last time the resolution was adopted.
Okay, I do have other questions, Vice Chair Davis, but I'm happy to wait in line.
Okay, I'll circle back to you. Chair Moss?
Could I just ask, I guess I might have a potential amendment proposition. Is that what we're getting to eventually here? Just proceed, please.
Well, we don't have a motion on the table yet, but if you want to make the motion and amend it all at the same time, you can.
I'll just ask a question and then maybe double back if we're going to be doing that. But my question is on the constitutional amendment. I'm just behind the curve on that. Where is that coming from, and how has it been proposed and put up? It sounds like we had a role in that at some point, and I'm sorry we've got so many matters with land trust, but could you remind me just kind of what the impetus is and the status of how does it focus on intergenerational equity in a way that's different, I guess, than what we're doing?
If I may, Member Davis?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'll just go back quickly to the last legislative session. Representative Jefferson Moss, who I think you know.
I think I do.
Ran a resolution and an accompanying bill for us in the last session. And the nexus of the bill was a study that the fund office did with their partners, because there's a requirement in trust law that you treat current and future beneficiaries equally or with equity. And the study was indicating that the investment portfolio and was leaning towards us being a savings account for the future generations. In other words, we were not distributing money to be fair with our current students, that it was benefiting future students more. And so the problem that is preventing them from distributing more money is a cap in the Constitution that will not allow a distribution of over 4%. And so that all the constitutional amendment does is raises the cap on the distribution to 5%.
Got it. Okay. And I had lost track of what the intergenerational equity meant. And now that it's being more actively managed and growing faster, that was the sense that it can spend more now and still be solvent and growing in the future, right? Was that kind of okay, thank you. I just got lost in the term there of intergenerational equity. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Straight?
Yes, in the whereas 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, the whereas where it talks about equity, it's misspelled. I know that's not a big deal. It'll be caught later, but they need a U. The equity, it's below in the be it further resolved. I was just wondering about and I don't have strong feelings on this, but the statement in the whereases of maintaining independence from political interference. I don't see that below. Is that in the full document and I just can't see it? Or is that element be it resolved. Let me. Okay. Okay, so the whereases in regards to actual implementation do set the table. They do set the stage for what's here. But the resolve part, is there a way to include this concept from the whereases into the be it further resolved section to where that makes it much stronger because that's what's actually being passed is the be it therefore resolved.
Would member Straight, I'm just looking, I see where you're saying that language could be beefed up, but it sort of is addressed in the very last, be it further resolved.
Yeah, I read that and I was thinking maybe, but I'm not.
To support all it's to support all distributions from the permanent state school fund. But it doesn't.
I don't have problems with the document. I was just wondering about beefing that up, but go ahead.
But maybe you say support the entire, I don't know. Let's go to member Bogus, and will you chew on that, member Straight, and think about an amendment or something that could possibly be tweaked to strengthen that language. Member Bogus?
Thank you, ma'am. I did have a question similar to member Straight. I'm wondering what political interference has occurred. That's my first question.
The only one I'm familiar with is that there was some talk at one point from the executive branch about using the monies for other things. But maybe Director Plant could tell me if I heard that incorrectly or what this is referring to.
Thank you. So it is a fact with the grants that were granted across the United States that in many, many cases, states lost their grants, either their funds or the lands, due to political interference. We had that case several times in the state of Utah before the task force was set up by the legislature to review the operations of the land office and how the fund was being managed. They had a 3-year task force, and the result created a land office that was independent, quasi-independent from state government, and the fund office has the same status. That doesn't entirely protect the fund and the trust from political interference, but it is an attempt to do so. It's been a challenge across the United States where lands are granted to a state and the state is expected to be the trustee and administer the trust according to trust principles for trust beneficiaries. And the trust beneficiaries are not the people who elect the policymakers. I think that you can see that that conflict. And so the state of Utah has tried to create a bit of a barrier so that both offices can operate with independence, but there continue to be challenges. So that's the reason that statement is there.
Could I follow up?
Sure.
I'm just wondering if there's a better way to articulate that. Because I don't think that the general public would really understand that. And I honestly, I thought you were referring to some sort of partisan battle here over land trusts that I was unaware of. And so I'm wondering if there would be a better way to articulate that. I don't have an amendment in my head because I didn't know exactly what you were referring to. And then I'm happy to wait in line. I just have one more question, Vice Chair Davis.
Okay, let's go to Chair Moss.
I'm just picking up the same line here. I wonder, and I'll just throw this out there. I wonder if it might be helpful to amend to say the success of the trust is intrinsically tied to financial growth over political considerations. Something that kind of says what we're trying to get at here is making decisions that are, you know, maximizing, optimizing, growing the fund rather than other political considerations or balances. It sounds a little bit like somebody might see that as accusatory, and I wonder if that captures it. That's the idea here, is that everything we do focuses on growing the fund. I guess if I could, Vice Chair Davis, could I just maybe ask Director Plant about that, if that captures it before I put it as an amendment? I want to capture what we're doing here without picking a fight.
Yes, would someone be willing to do this for me? Would someone be willing to put a motion on the table? And then we can start making amendments, and then we can
I'll
vote on
do that.
however, okay.
Yeah, I can put out what I just described and just see if it flies, I guess.
Or the suggested motion, and then you can amend it, either way.
Yeah, okay. I'll just propose an amendment that would revise that line, whereas the success of the school trust is intrinsically tied to.
Well, Jim,
sorry.
Sorry to stop you. Would you put a motion on the floor that's the suggested motion for the meeting?
Yeah, I moved that. Sorry, I didn't say move. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's just the recommended motion, and then we'll start doing amendments.
Yeah. So just to say I move that.
On the screen. See this recommended?
Okay, I'm sorry. You're talking about starting with the underlying motion to get us going. I apologize.
And then start amending the
I
document.
thought you were looking for a formal motion of the amendment. I'll put out the recommended action. The committee approves and reauthorize the updated resolution establishing the official position of the Utah State Board of Education requiring school trusts and funds for approval on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. The committee has a motion on the floor as stated. And now we are open for further discussion and amendments. While you're formulating your amendment, Chair Moss, let's go back to Member Boggess, and then we'll go to Member Straight. Go ahead, Member Boggess.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm very concerned that we're putting the cart before the horse with a constitutional amendment that has not yet passed. As I read the background documents, we've got this constitutional amendment. It's made it through the legislature. It hasn't made it through the people. And we have language in here that, according to our backup documents, is directly tied to that. And that would be something that I'm opposed to linking those and putting that cart before the horse. And so I guess my question would be for Director Plant, is there a way that we could articulate the concerns about providing for our future without putting that cart before the horse?
That would come in the form of an amendment. So if you want to amend whatever language you feel is tied to the constitutional amendment, you can propose an amendment and then we can vote on that. But I don't know that it's necessarily putting the cart before the horse, because the resolution is because all of this is coming up. That's why we're making a formal opinion on this, but this is also much more than the constitutional amendment. That's another separate thing, in my opinion. But if you've got an amendment to this language that does what you want to do, Member Boggess, then let's get the language up and put it on the screen. Or just we'll see if whoever's driving can help us.
Okay, but that doesn't answer my question though.
Your question is there language?
Well, the backup document says that the language is tied to the constitutional amendment. And I just want to understand that better. Because if that's true, I would take issue with that. I just want to clarify and understand that.
Director Plant, do you want to answer that question?
I'd be happy to. So intergenerational equity is a trust principle. We don't have a choice. I mean, if it's a trust, your responsibility is to intergenerational equity. The reason that we're pointing it out here is because currently we're not in a place of honoring intergenerational equity. And it's because there are some provisions in the Constitution that prevent that from happening. So you can remove the language if you want to. It won't change the fact that it is a trust principle and you have to abide by it. You have to make it happen.
Okay, and you're
it's not
talking about the 4 versus the 5, is that?
It's the 4 versus the 5, but there's more to it than that. It has to do with as well how the investments are made in the fund, right? So you could do investments that produce a lot of money for today, but not much going forward, or the other way around. So it's an ongoing issue, an ongoing challenge that the investment managers have to maintain. We sometimes have people who come to us and say, you've got a $3 billion fund and the children need money today. Why are you not spending the money? Well, why are you not distributing more? And the answer to that question is it's a trust. And one of the trust principles is a commitment to intergenerational equity. So it's an ongoing challenge and issue. And yes, the constitutional amendment is just about making sure that the fund managers can operate under that trust principle.
Okay, thank you. I may have an amendment, Vice Chair
Okay.
Davis, thank you.
Okay. Member Moss, do you have your amendment ready? Oh, sorry. Let me go to Member Straight. Oh,
Yeah.
you took your hand down. Do you still have something, Member Straight?
Well, I'm actively thinking, and I kind of worry about just throwing my active thinking out there. So when they determine to distribute what used to be 4% and what is now 5%, that's based on the current trust fund amount at a certain given point. How's that distributed, and at what point is that determined?
So may I answer?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so the formula is in the code and the Constitution, the formula for distribution. And yes, the 4% is the part that's in the Constitution. The rest of the formula is in code. So it is the 4% that is limiting. So for instance, if the 5% had been in place this year, if they followed the formula that's in code, we would have distributed $15 million more than we did to schools this year. So the formula that is in the code deals on a 20-quarter rolling average of the value of the fund, and the cap of that 20-quarter rolling average then is 4% of the value of that 20-quarter rolling average. By raising it to 5%, it will allow an increase in distribution. I want to be clear, it doesn't mean we're going to jump to 5%. It means that we remove the barrier of the 4% so that more money can be distributed.
So the constitutional amendment, that's thus the resolution that changes from the 4 to 5.
Correct.
And then the 5%. And So there's also a concern then that
Thank you.
there needs to be even more protections in regards to protecting these monies. Because if the 5% is adopted by the Constitution, I don't understand why we need more than that. Because that is the amendment to the Constitution, right? The people are going to vote to change from 4 to 5% or not.
That's right.
To preserve generational equity, the 5% has been determined to be more equitable. But my concern was that there needed to be even more protection from political interference. But if the 5% is in the Constitution, if it's changed and it goes to 5%, isn't that enough protection in and of itself? Do we need to go into all these other things? I see your head shaking, so I would like to hear that thought.
May I respond? So the challenge is not just the fund distribution. We're talking about political interference that has had to do with selling land at below market value. It has had to do with distributing money from the fund for a purpose that was not for public schools. So the maintaining independence from political interference is not just about protecting the distribution from the fund. It's about other things as well. I hope that's clear.
Well, if someone has purchased property and the legislature has been active in allowing that property to be purchased below market value, that sounds like a criminal act to me. But then that goes back to Chair Moss's, we don't want to be accusatory with this, but at the same time, we need to have those protections. And I'm not sure exactly how you do it without just going to plain language and saying it straight up, because this seems to dance around the issue. And when it comes to a constitutional amendment, there's no dancing to be done. It makes total sense to me, the 4 to 5%. That makes 100%. I have confidence in that idea. It seems to be a great idea. But this interference part, the political part, that's where, I'm going to just have to say that I'm willing to put myself on the line to do what's right for the children of Utah. And I think we need stronger language. I don't know what that is, and I've been trying to think through that. But whereas where the success of the school trust is intrinsically tied to maintaining independence from political interference, and that's to me, that's straightforward. Now we need to say what that is absolutely not to take place, that political interference. Anyway, I think I've said enough, but I haven't provided anything good yet. So I will listen to everyone else and try and get my brain wrapped around this.
Thank you, Member Straight. Chair Moss was working on some language. Could part of the consternation be that we are literally trying to say what not to do instead of what to do, to Chair Moss's point earlier? We want to say that this should be overseen and distributed by this independent or quasi-independent body, and that the monies generated should go to schools. Period. Chair Moss, is that what you were saying earlier, or do you have language that helps clarify that for amendment purposes?
Yeah, and I've been just thinking through it as I've been listening. I mean, we could say, and I guess I'll propose an amendment. We can just see if it works or not. I don't. not committed to any particular language, but we might just say, I guess I'll propose an amended language, whereas the success of the school trust is intrinsically tied to prioritizing economic growth for use in public schools over political considerations. That might start to get there. We have.
Is there someone who could put that on the
Yeah,
screen
sure.
for us?
If we've got a.
Could you repeat it while they're getting up, maybe slowly? Oh, someone got it.
Yeah,
Thank
Cami-
you. Is that Cami? Thank you.
Yeah, Cammy's
you.
doing that. Also, Cammy, Board Member Bogus has a motion that's in the email to you. So, but I know we're on this motion here, but I just want to make sure that you knew that Board Member Bogus had sent a motion to. I mean,
Thank you. And I'm not sure if I caught everything you said, Chair Moss.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that was the idea, is that we focus on the why. We're avoiding political considerations because we're focusing on
Mhm.
economic growth, and it's for the use in schools rather than something else. That might get at the why without being quite as confrontational, but get the same. I'll put that out there and let the body take a look at it.
Would you consider this a friendly adjustment? Instead of saying intrinsically tied, whereas the school trust is solely for economic growth for use in schools, or solely for use in schools, just period.
Meaning just that?
The school trust is solely for use in schools over political considerations, or solely for prioritizing economic growth in schools over political consideration, or something like that. And just getting rid of intrinsically.
That seems right. I guess if Director Plant feels like that follows the intent, I mean, it is. Is that correct to say that this is intended solely for the benefit of K-12 schools?
Director Plant?
Yeah, I think you're saying generally the same thing. And if you feel better about this language, I think it says the same thing.
Would you feel comfortable getting rid of the success and just say, whereas the school trust is solely for prioritizing economic growth for use in schools?
Yes, and I think that then also go as Board Member Straight has been indicating, it is reflected in the therefores below, right? That talk about the money going directly to schools, that talk about each one supporting each one of those entities that's involved in the trust in performing their missions. I think it works.
I like that better than the interference. I think the interference could feel abrasive to some of our lawmaking partners. I don't know how to say that better, but I like this better too. Let me just go down and see if we've got more hands here. Why don't we go ahead and vote on this unless there's any more discussion on this amendment? Member Straight, go ahead.
Just real quick. Would it make it stronger if we moved it into the therefores, this statement? Because, I mean, that's where the actual enactment occurs, is in the therefores. This is an explanation. It does hold some weight, but it doesn't hold as much weight as if we put it in the therefores. But I like this language a lot. It's simple, it's straightforward, and strong.
I think if you want to propose an amendment, Member Straight, of a language change, you can. We could put this in the whereas now while you're thinking about maybe a tweak down below that kind of says something similar. But let's vote on this amendment right now for this. There's an amendment on the table. Member Chair Moss has moved that We amend the resolution to say, whereas the school trust is solely for prioritizing economic growth for use in schools over political considerations.
Did
Members,
I,
please- Yes, Chair Moss.
Member Chair, Vice Chair, I wonder, I'm just trying to look at the language. I mean, it might have some clarity. Whereas the school trust is solely for prioritizing. Maybe whereas the focus of the school trust is solely for prioritizing economic growth in the fund.
I like that. Sorry.
Do we call it the fund? In the trust?
Could we say,
Economic growth of the trust for use in schools over political considerations? That might kind of read a little better. Is that technically correct? Is it the trust that we're talking about is the corpus of the body of the?
It's a lot of, seems like a lot of words, but do we need them all is the question.
Well, I thought otherwise it was a little unclear. The folks.
Is of the trust the second time already understood?
Yeah, I suppose that's probably true. I guess we're not talking about economic growth generally for the state. We're talking about the growth of the body of the trust, prioritizing economic growth of the. I think we need to say of the trust to avoid the appearance of, well, there's other things that trigger economic growth of the local community or
Okay.
whatever, right? I mean, we're just talking about building the fund. I think what Director Plant's getting at is our decisions ought to be those that build the trust, and that all that growth ought to be directed into the schools rather than political considerations. Could I ask Director Plant if that is consistent with?
You can. I just want to make sure that the solely refers to the trust being used for schools and not
Oh, I see. So
something
maybe we move
else.
that. Okay, for prioritizing economic growth for the sole use of focus of the trust is for prioritizing. Okay, sorry.
For sole
I would say
use in
this.
schools,
Yeah. the
or
focus of
solely
the
for
trust
use in
is-
schools.
If we said the focus of the trust is prioritizing economic growth of the trust for the sole use in schools.
Or
yeah,
solely for use in schools.
sure, yeah.
Member Bogus, did you have something to add to this also?
So we could take
Yes,
out the
ma'am.
first solely while we're at it, though. I think, sorry,
Yes.
Cindy, you were trying
Take
to,
out.
yeah, so is prioritizing economic growth of the trust for the sole use in schools over, right? Does that capture it? Vice Chair Davis, I think what you were,
I mean, I don't know.
all right, captures what I was
Syntax
after.
feels weird for the sole use in schools. Syntax seems better to me, solely for use in schools,
That's
but
fine too, yeah.
Either
solely
way.
for use in schools.
someone who knows better can tell
So
us.
solely should be before for, there you go. For use in schools over
Yeah.
political is for prioritizing economic growth of the trust solely for use in schools over political considerations. That reads right.
Member, okay, now wait, I had Member Bogus up and Member Straight's hand is up, but Member Bogus, did we get you or did you have
No,
a different amendment, or is it this one?
I just am wondering, if we interchange the word economic with the word fund for prioritizing growth of the fund, to me, there's just a lot of words, and I agree with you. It's clunky and the syntax is interesting, but I totally support what we're trying to say. I just would like it to be clear. And I do think when you say economic, people think of the state or the community. And so I'm wondering about for prioritizing growth of the fund solely for use in schools.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm sorry. I need to stop talking informally.
And I don't know. Well,
I'll
it's
hopefully-
okay because we're kind of doing a little wordsmithing on the fly right here, but I also don't know if we even need the word prioritizing. What is the focus of the fund? I mean, the focus of the school trust, I don't know if we need, what is our timeline on this? Can someone tell us, is this timely? Do we need to get this out now? Like when is the vote coming up for the constitutional change? We need it before the legislative session, I think. Director Plant?
Yes, if you want to send this back to the Trust Advisory Committee, we can take the thoughts that I think that you're expressing and come back with another proposal. Will that be helpful?
I would move that we send this back to the Trust Advisory Committee to work on the syntax of this language and include alternate language for political interference, and to be descriptive about intergenerational equity rather than using that as a label, because it's tripping people up.
Okay.
But and then period, that's the end of my motion.
I did send forward 2 amendments, if we could forward those to Director Plant as they consider that. Oh, I
Okay.
guess we need to vote on this. And then I just have one more thought before we vote on your motion. Vice Chair.
That's fine, but if you have ideas that you want to include into this, we probably should look at those now, because those would become part of the motion, because we're directing them from this committee what to work on.
Okay, then could we pull those motions? Is that acceptable?
Yes.
The first one would be in the 6th whereas. I do believe that final prepositional phrase there, it's a compound, but I think it's a misplaced modifier. And so we're not giving it to schools with a focus on intergenerational equity. The fund itself has that focus. So I think that modifier is misplaced. And I sent some language through to amend that to read the Enabling Act and the Utah State Constitution required school trust earning and investment to be focused on solutions for both the present and the future, and to be used for support of common schools in Utah. Something to that effect, so that we don't have that misplaced modifier there. And then my second amendment was in the first further resolved, after the words public education, it would read that the school trust is managed prudently and productively for the benefit of public education, both now and in the future, or present and future public education consistent with standard trust principles. And that way we have that understanding of that language without the misplaced modifiers.
So I think that those ideas fit within the current motion that's on the table, because they're about those sections. I love the ideas. I would play with the language. So maybe the advisory committee can play with that language and get it so it really rings. We're all kind of trying to work on the fly here. And I would add to what Member Boggess said, and maybe a word to consider would be current and future students. So there's just clarity about what we're even talking about. But anyway, I think that fits. If you're all okay with, you have a tall order, Director Plant, but if you're okay with all of this, can we have that motion language back up on the screen? I move that we send the resolution back to the Trust Advisory Committee to work on this language and be descriptive of intergenerational equity. And work on alternate language to political interference. Actually, we already did that one, right? We already passed that other one.
We did not pass it.
Okay, then both of those. Let's just play with that language, and y'all can wordsmith it in a place that's away from this time constrained committee meeting. Chair Moss.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask the same thing. Will you take the language that we had been finessing, even though it didn't pass, just kind of as something as a starting point? Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Director Plant. We appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
I think we need to vote on this, actually.
Yep.
So again, there's a motion on the floor to send the resolution back to the Trust Advisory Committee to work on this language and be descriptive of intergenerational equity and work on alternate language to political interference and any other any other revisions needed. That'll give you the freedom. If you find things that could read more smoothly, you can do that too. Members, please vote. Okay, that passes unanimously with member Norton absent. Looks like we lost her. Thank you. Let's move on to 1.3. Action item related to basic program review and or recommendations.
Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you'll recognize Mr. Hauber, I'm not sure if Mr. Bills has joined us, but I believe they want to comment on these related to basic programs that we're about to review. And also I recommend that Cami pull the backup up for each one of the programs. So if they're going to talk specifically to one program, you can hear their input, but also see staff input to those particular programs. Will that work, ma'am?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Todd, are you still with us?
Yes, I think so. Is my mic on?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay. Yeah.
All right. I don't know that we had prepared an overall statement for this agenda item. We do acknowledge the work of the USBE staff with regards to the input they've already provided. So in the backup, we've reviewed that and are supportive of many of those statements. We wanted to be able to provide any additional information or color to the topic as you start to ask questions about these programs. There are ones that I guess, generally speaking, we're a little concerned that the Public Ed Approps motion from their last meeting was that the funding would not appear in the base budget bill, but these items would be up for deeper discussion during the legislative session. So we do have some concern that these items could be in jeopardy of funding. And we know that at the end of the day, these are programs that are supporting students in their learning and don't want to have adverse effects on those students as we try to deliberate what's appropriate, what's the best way to approach these different funding streams. So just wanted to leave that as like a general statement that there is some angst out there that the PEA has taken us down this path. But again, today we'd like to just chime in where it's appropriate. We don't have a opening statement or comment for each one specifically.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Jones, are you going to do a quick summary of each of these?
So what I recommend, ma'am, is my understanding is we do have staff available, our subject matter experts on each one of these. Because some of the programs are on the programmatic side, while like pupil transportation is on the ops side.
Yeah.
So what we did, and I just want to, offer just kind of a caveat here. If the finance committee chooses to take no action today on any of these or make any recommendations, that's fine. But to Mr. Hauber's point, we absolutely want to make sure that the board, through you, the finance committee, has the opportunity to see and hear where staff or the recommendations of staff, what the LFA Ben Leschman had written as far as consideration by PEA for each one of these programs. The only thing I would request is that the session starts in I think the second or third week in January. So technically, following this month, you have quote unquote 2 more meetings, right? Mm-hmm. So even if you don't do anything today here in Finance Committee and you want to spend more time, with these programs to make recommendations to the legislature, get more input from the field. As Mr. Hobber said, we can walk through this today. But then again, you might want to, make recommendations to the board on, what to do or not to do with some of these programs, right? So I hope that makes sense. So we're not trying to rush you, but all we're trying to do is make sure to Mr. Hobber's point, that these programs are going to get talked quite a bit about. And this is the first year, I think, where I've ever heard they're saying, well, they're not going to be in the base budget because, they want to develop or talk, they being the legislature, want to develop and talk about them more. Does that help, ma'am? Or,
Yes, and can I just clarify, the LFA is not necessarily recommending, is the LFA recommending that the monies from these be moved to above the line, or just that they not be included at all? And then if someone or the legislator votes, then they put each back in?
It could be one or some of those, what you just said. So for instance, let's, if in your direction, man, can we just start with Title I schools, the paraeducators program?
Yes, but can we quickly just clarify what Mr. Hobber said? That I hear him saying that there is a concern that there's no timeline attached to this, and if they're just automatically not included in the base budget, it's gonna wreak a bit of havoc in the field. Am I hearing that accurately, Mr. Hobber, or can you clarify?
Yes, thank you. That is the concern. Many of these programs have ongoing commitments to them, and we're in the process during the legislative session to build budgets and get things ready for the next school year, and not even having the baseline available is disconcerting. I think I understood the PEA action to be that these particular line items would not be funded, but the money is not lost to the PEA committee, but that it would be in something like the flexible allocation line item. And so by default, it changes funding distribution from program-specific calculations to just a WPU distribution, which for some members of the committee, that's preferable. It may not be preferable for the programs as we try to administer them at the district level.
Has your last question, we'll go to Chair Moss. Has your body taken any type of official position of any of these that you would like to see put into the flexible allocation?
Was that a question to me?
Yes, or a position that you do not want to see any of these put in the flexible allocation?
At this point, we do not have a position one way or the other. Those are deliberations that we'll definitely have through the JLC as we get into the session.
Chair Moss?
Thanks. Yeah, just a systemic and procedural question, make sure I understand the opportunity. The next PEA, I think, is January, correct? We don't have an upcoming PEA meeting where we would be.
Yeah, right. So there's no upcoming PEA meeting. The next one is when the session starts for PEA. However, EAC typically, I don't know, Todd can help me here, actions the base budget in their December meeting. So this is why, from a timing perspective, and I understand, right, I think I understand Chair Davis's question to Todd. It, obviously, it would help if we knew the JLC and or UASBO positions on these. So that's why I was saying, what we're trying to do is foster that type of environment where you're getting as much lead time, so to speak, on these programs and hearing from the BAs, and then hopefully the timing will work out together where your recommendations can be considered by JLC, or the timing of it, so that we could actually get it in front of, quote unquote, in front of EAC for their consideration. But given too the information that we have that Todd also shared is that that these aren't scheduled to be considered to be in the base budget. So then, from there, we, move together towards the legislative session. And depending on what, you, the board, want to recommend to the legislature regarding each one of these programs or not, at least we can say that we were involved in the process and the decision making on whether or not any of these go into the flexible allocation or not, or, to your point, Chair
When
Davis.
it-
My concern is that timing, right?
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, sir.
Could I follow up?
Yes, and then member Straight.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the timing of opportunity. So we have an EAC meeting in December. We might propose recommendations. We're not looking to reorder our funding priorities. What exactly is our opportunity to tee up a recommendation here that goes into that process? Is it to vote for something now or December that goes into December EAC? Is
Yes.
it to, these answers that are here in blue on the sheet, were those prepared by staff, and have those been shared with PEA or EAC?
So may I, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, to your first question, yes, all of the responses in blue or purple, however it looks to you, are staff responses or information for decision-making purposes by your body, right?
Okay, they haven't been shared with PEA. That's for us to use in.
Right, yeah, it's for
Okay.
you.
Got it.
Yeah, so, right, and so, because of the amount of programs that the LFA was considering in the related to basic, we basically split this into two phases, right? Last month this month the board did Beverly Taylor Sorensen, the educator, and teacher supplies and materials. So now these are the programs that the LFA had said, hey, look, as an example, Title I Schools Paraeducators Program is, for lack of a better term, not a lot of money. It doesn't go to all of the schools. However, to Mr. Haber's point, it is likely benefiting those schools, and we're not sure if we would want that money to go into the flexible allocation and be spread out over the entire, right? Those are the types of things that the legislature, according to Ben, want to know from the board is, we just don't want it to get into the session and have board members say, well, I didn't know I didn't know they had done this. I didn't know they were, looking at putting these programs into related basic. Where was our opportunity to take a position and make recommendation? That's what this is.
Oh,
This
okay.
to move towards that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so we could make a recommendation here that goes to the board in December and goes to EAC in December. I'm just looking for timeline and sequence of our opportunity.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that
So
what you're looking for? Okay.
perfect, sir. Yeah. You can make,
I didn't want to go into the substance because I get all that. I'm just trying to tee up what exactly the opportunities for action here. And it would be that to look at your input as stated in blue or purple, whatever it is, see if we want to turn that into a recommendation that goes to the board in December. That would go to EAC in December and then into the
Correct.
PAC. Is that kind of the sequence? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make sure I understand as we go through the substance.
Yeah,
of it. What's the opportunity? Okay, I got you.
yes, sir. So if I may, Madam Chair, that is the preferable and recommended sequence by your staff, by me,
Okay.
to do that. However, what I'm saying is we already know that that from PEA that these programs are not scheduled to be going into the base budget pending more action and discussion or consideration by the legislature during the session. I mean,
They're not going in.
well, they haven't decided that yet for sure, right? So
Okay.
this is why it's important that we put
We
this
can
in
join
front
the
of us.
conversation.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. Members,
Okay, ma'am.
let's go to member Straight. You had your hand up. I know, let me just ask Deputy Superintendent Jones, what's going to be the most efficient way to work through these? Would you recommend doing a quick summary on each and the staff recommendation? Or would you recommend us just looking at these and then asking questions? Because to my knowledge, is UASBO or the staff, or is anybody recommending that any of these be put into this flexible allocation at this time?
I don't believe we are doing that. From the staff perspective, if anything, there might be a recommendation just to stay status quo, right? And not have it that way. I can't speak for UASBO, but it sounds to me like they haven't vetted this easy yet, like you are here today. So, but
Yeah.
Mr. Haber speak to that. So
Mr. Haber, so you personally are saying you would not move any of these into the flexible allocation, but what the soonest we would get any input from your body is January?
So thank you for the questions. The movement into the flexible allocation is really a pretty hot topic even among the business administrators. There are a group that feel that many of these programs could be funded simply through the WPU, and as districts prioritize those particular students and their needs, that things could be done that way. Others of us have actually implemented the programs in such a way that they're integral to how we operate, such as like the digital teaching and learning. That would be significant to have those dollars change from the grant program into a WPU distribution, because it shifts. It just changes how the monies come, and everyone realizes that. But the impact is different across the various school districts. So we've not come to a vote on those types of things, because even internally we debate whether it should be in the one category or the other. Several of these programs, though, have their own histories, and whether they have been effectively administered or implemented is in question. And so even though they are small dollar amounts, they probably are worth that deeper question of what is the value add of the program, and is it accomplishing the purpose for which it was created? And those are very valid questions that we think should be explored and come to some conclusion, so that we know what direction we as districts need to run. The next JLC meeting won't be until the first week of January, as far as I know, so that it won't be taken up any sooner than that.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Superintendent Jones?
Yes, so Madam Chair, back to your question. My recommendation is you go program by program.
Okay, let's
Right.
start with Title I schools, paraeducators
Right.
programs.
Starting with what the LFA presented, which is this slide here,
Mhm.
right? What the LFA presented. So if you go to the lower left-hand quadrant, these were questions that the LFA was asking for the legislature to consider when they start their decision-making process on, to Mr. Haber's point on, hey, is this benefiting? Was it, did this money go for its intended purpose? There's an opportunity here too for staff to recommend an increase in funding. Granted, you already have sent your request for funding in, but that doesn't mean you can't amend things and, be attentive to that for the process. That's what this is designed to do, is to ensure that the board, to the maximum extent possible, knows what's going on in the session program by program, right? I know it takes a lot of time. I know it takes a lot of energy. The timing is different between when we meet, when JLC meets, but I go one by one, listen, if you want to just read this things in purple and then ask questions like you were asking, that's fine too. Because like I said, my understanding is we have our staff here are subject matter experts on each and every one of these. And then I know Mr. Haber's available to raise his hand if he has a particular piece of input to any one or all of these programs. So I hope that helps.
It does. Seeing no hands, I have a question on this first one. Do we know what the total amount is? We've got percentages on this $300,000. It's only 2.3% up to 22%, probably depending on the year, of non-special ed paraeducators just in the CSI schools. The average is about 5 to 8%. Do we know well, maybe that's enough. What's the total number of dollars that are spent on the Title I paraeducators between federal and state funds? I assume it's only 300,000 of state funds and all the rest is federal. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. So this amount of $300,000 is entirely state funds. We can get you to my understanding. Any of the staff can correct me that's here for this, but that's the focus of this. Is from the LFA perspective. The question is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the 300,000 helping? Should it be increased? What differences is it making? And that's why we asked staff to go through this and, provide more detail for decision-making purposes by you. Doesn't mean you have to make a decision, but yeah, that's my understanding is the 300,000. But you can see in the right-hand side that there was a change so we're in fiscal year 24. So, and I think, there's staff here that would be able to explain that. So
Is there any other allocation that is solely for the CSI schools that this could be rolled into, so we don't have one more separate line item, and then it would still go to benefit the schools that it's intended for?
Yeah, that's not a question I can answer. Is there someone from the staff that could answer that question for Chair Davis? Sam here?
Because for a recommendation, that would be preferential to me than to rolling it in purely to a flexible allocation, because then it's couple, few dollars per LEA versus something that at least could still have an impact for CSI schools, but not be a whole separate line item.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. Real quick, let me ask.
Sorry.
Yeah. Let me just ask Chief of Staff Young, who on the staff prepared the purple? I thought they were going to be here. So do you know who that is, Sarah?
So that would be Director Tracy Vandeventer. Let me see. I know that they have another item in another committee. So let me just work on that real quick.
Okay, let's move to the next one unless others have questions on this one, but I don't see any hands. So let's move to the next item while we're waiting for Tracy.
So the elementary school counselor program, I believe Director Franzen is available for this one. You can see lower left-hand quadrant, you can see the different questions the LFA asked and then the comparisons that were agreed.
It's really hard to recommend to move that into flexible allocation when we just are finally getting counselors in our elementary schools. But maybe others have other questions or opinions. I just don't see any questions on this one. So let's move to the next one. Oh, Chair Moss has a question.
I did. I mean, I guess what they're hinting at here is, could it be rolled into the student health and counseling support program? It's a $21 million program, right? Or 25, something in there. The difference is there's no match. Would there be any downside? It looks like you've got a limited, you've got school counselors and social workers versus a broader ability to fund nurses, behavioral support, etc. Would there be a downside in our view of combining that into that program? They seem to be looking for consolidation or overlap. A lot of their questions go to that, that's the thrust of their question, right? Some of it might be above the WPU. Some of it looks like it's leaning towards consolidation of 2 or 3 related programs. Do we see a downside if they went that route?
So from my vantage point here at this level, I don't see a disadvantage to that. However, again, we're trying to facilitate the opportunity to hear, not just my input, but, Mr. Haber's and or any of the staff that have concerns along that line. So
I'm looking for hands now and I don't see any, but the disadvantage in my opinion is when you use funding as a policy lever, we would roll this into a program that is K-12. And what we've had historically, when you've got 1 to 350 students in our secondary schools, is that all the counseling monies go into secondary. So I think this was an attempt to get some of the badly needed counseling monies into the elementary schools. I have Dale Frost with his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Chair Davis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
To answer Chair Moss's question, or at least try to get at that, and Cami, are you driving? Could you go to slide 17? It's a good overview slide for the members of the committee, and it shows And I just, so the slide, sorry. Oh, is this not the presentation? I apologize. There was a slide. Okay, I'll answer it from here. So in there, of the 160 or so LEAs, only 31 are participating in this program. And that's kind of the case for all of these programs, why LFA brought it, that participation is not broad across the board. And so, Chair Moss, the consideration is, by consolidating these programs, we do reduce administrative burdens, but those who are participating in the programs are likely, right now, would likely receive less if it were distributed across all LEAs. So that's kind of the balancing act as policymakers. So I'm not trying to opine whether it's good or bad. But yeah, so those who are receiving that, and I think your point, Vice Chair Davis, is correct, that this is meant to target that. Is it worth? So yeah, there will be certain LEAs that receive more, certain ones who are participating right now that would receive less.
Thank you, Chair Moss.
Just a real quick follow-up. When programs are consolidated like that, is it possible to retain any of the, designation for elementary? I mean, if they're leaning towards some kind of consolidation, right? I'm just not as familiar with that process. Can you preserve what was meant by having a separate program and still get the economies of scale or reduction of administrative cost by rolling it into something else? Just as a practical matter, how does that work?
Vice Chair Davis, could I try to answer that question?
Please.
So the answer to the question would be it depends on program. For example, if you're rolling something into the flexible allocation, we don't have a lot of flexibility because it's what's your proportion of the WPU, right? But if, for example, this were to be rolled into student health and counseling support and there was a carve out or some sort of prioritization, so that would require legislative change, possibly. So, there's definitely nuance on how to deal with this that could address some of those concerns, and may continue to lower administrative burden. So it really depends on the program, where it's going to get folded into, and how that's handled.
Okay, so theoretically, you might still protect elementary schools. Again, I'm not suggesting a direction, but that's something that's a pragmatic possibility if that were the direction. Okay.
If you could do that without having a whole nother line item, then that would be a good recommendation, I think. Although you still have winners and losers. But okay, we have Director Vanderventer here. Tracy, we had a question about the Title I Schools Paraeducator Program. Is there another account that distributes money only to CSI schools that this separate line item could be rolled into, so it remains for the benefit of CSI schools, but we're trying to streamline and consolidate?
Yeah, thank you. Tracy Vandeventer, Director of the Center for Continuous School Improvement. And we do have other funding that comes through Title I federal funds that is distributed annually to support the comprehensive support and improvement programs. Certainly these funds could be connected with that, but it would require that we still, in the way that it's distributed, it would have to come in two forms, because one is federal funding, one state.
There's no other state fund that goes solely to CSI.
That's correct. There are no other funds that come from state funding. Our state funding goes to Elevate and Springboard schools.
Okay. And how much money federally is going to pay for paraeducators? See, there are more Title I schools than all Title I schools are not CSI, correct?
That is correct. Just a small portion, approximately 420 schools are Title I, and we have 31 schools that are comprehensive support and improvement currently. We may have more next year because those schools that don't make progress in their additional targeted support and improvement student group success, they would potentially next year become a CSI in a third category that focuses on student group support. It's possible we could have maybe 85, 90 schools that would join the ranks. So we would move from 31 and increase by another 80 to 90 schools at that time. But you're right, it still is a small portion when you're looking at all of the Title I programs that we have out there, you know, for our programs in the state.
So if you potentially triple, then you're going from $9,000 per school to $3,000 per school. I mean, at what point is it not worth it to have this separate line item? It's going to turn into an intensive services situation where there are a lot of needs and there's never enough funds to cover the needs, but is it worth it to even keep going the administration of this? Dr. Voorhees joined us. Did you have something to add to this conversation, Dr. Voorhees?
No, I joined to see if I could help with the counselor question.
Okay. Well, Dr. Van Deventer, you've been helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and switch back to the counselor case. And Dr. Voorhees, did you have something to add to the counselor?
What was the specific question that you are concerned about?
The question was, if we, in an effort to streamline, roll this program, elementary school counselor program, into the student health and counseling support program, which is the K-12 program, is there a way to do that and still designate that the money go to elementary schools or not? Or once it rolls into that program, you can't designate, it would still have to be a whole separate line item.
So we have an application process at present, but if you remember, I think it was last month when you looked at that program, because the LFA had questions about that program as well. And we didn't recommend that program would be rolled into MSP or because we don't have all the LEAs participating yet. So we recommended that continue to be competitive. So there still is an application process for that program. So we could include in the application the this piece of funding and the requirements related to, you have to, if you're going to apply, you have to use this much of it for elementary school. I don't know off the elementary school counseling. I don't know off the top of my head the relationship between the LEAs that get this funding and the LEAs who apply for the school-based mental health qualifying grant program. We could certainly look at that. So I mean, just like initial thoughts, I don't think it's impossible. I would want to talk to Deborah about making sure that there weren't, issues with two different funding codes or whatever. But we're basically doing that with the prevention block grant. I mean, is that what you're thinking? Yeah.
Something similar. Is the student health and counseling support program something that's funded for everybody, or is it a competitive grant?
Well, it's available to everyone. Not everyone right now is taking advantage of it.
Okay, so they're both competitive grants. There's going to be winners and losers anyway. It could be, one could be incorporated into the other with an application change. So Chair Moss, that answers if you want to move to do something of that nature. Does that give you the information?
And this is an off-the-cuff response. So obviously, I would need to look into it, but it seems like the same kind of thing you wanted to do and are doing with the prevention block grant.
Okay.
Is this the right time for motions, Vice Chair Davis? Are you inviting that or just hold?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I would move that the Finance Committee recommend that the board consider consolidating these two programs while preserving the allocation for elementary schools that's currently in the elementary school counselor program.
And do we need a grandfathering or a timeline roll in so that those who are, potentially going to lose here don't lose for this school year? They have time to apply for this other thing.
But I don't know if that's a question for me or for Tracy.
Well, it would be for Leah because this one's not
Leah,
the
sorry.
CSI.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
For Leah, yeah.
So
guess-
say that
yeah,
again,
I'll
Chair
talk about
Moss.
I think the question is whether there'd be winners and losers in the grandfathering. I think that's a common question that comes up. There's always in adjustment of programs, there's winners and losers. At some point, we have, I think, a ton of potential grandfathering and hold harmless money. And I worry about doing that all the time. I mean, sometimes there are winners and losers and people adjust, but I also get that people have planned their budgets and it's hard. So I guess I'd be curious what the extent of winners and losers might be if we did this while preserving the elementary part.
Well, you can see on the screen how many LEAs are participating. And for the school-based qualified mental health grant program, there are 113 LEAs and 4 RESAs who are grantees. So we're looking at just under 120 who are participating in that grant program. So
they wouldn't necessarily lose it. It would be a preservation of some sort. I guess I'm just trying to gauge the impact if we were to.
Question is the timeline.
Yeah, the timeline.
There's always going to be winners and losers. The question is the
Scott's
timeline.
got 2 hands up.
Scott has some answers for us.
Well, so from the timeline, and I'd appreciate if Mr. Hauber can help me here too, but even up my own staff too, Deborah and Sam. So if the legislature were to combine these programs, then we would see that it would come out of the session and we would be able to put this all together, I think, for fiscal year 25, because that's when they set their budgets anyway, is following the session. So I think we'd be on an okay timeline, but I'm open to hearing from others.
So is the motion framed up that I sort of spouted that into the air? I apologize. And I'm not sure if Cammie's tracking motions.
I got part of it, but I may need some help with the end.
There's a motion on the floor that the committee recommends that the board consider consolidating the elementary school council program and the student health counseling support program while preserving the allocation for elementary schools. Do we need to add through the application process? Because if you don't, you have 2 different lines of code still. I mean, that was the suggestion to
That makes sense. I mean,
preserve.
I think we're just
Okay.
trying to get this in the pipeline for the board, right? So that would frame it up and allow the board to kind of take a whack. I don't know if we need to say in there explicitly that this is all for recommendation of the legislature, not just something that we decide to do. At least as I understand it, this is not our determining unilaterally to consolidate. It is putting
No,
that recommendation into the legislative process, right?
I think because it's in this agenda item, all of these are understood
Alright.
to be
Yeah.
that the board recommends to the
Right.
legislature. So we need to say the committee recommends the board to recommend to the legislature.
Yeah, there you go.
To consider. Yep. The committee recommends that the board recommends to the legislature to consider consolidating the elementary school counselor program and the student health counseling support program while preserving the allocation for elementary schools through the application process. I'll look for hands to speak to this. I'll personally just say some of the logistics and semantics would need to be worked out, like the percentage gets preserved. You're not going to be able to preserve the exact dollar amount. I mean, that's going to shift over time and such, but I think that's understood. Seeing no other hands, members, please vote. Director Thronson has her hand up, so let's just suspend this vote for a moment, like in space for a second, and have Director Thronson address us?
Thank you. Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. It just made me think about the concurrent enrollment, the way we do that, like there's 60% for this and 40% for that. So we have programs we could model this kind of idea around already, where you're saying this percentage is going to be cut out for this program, and then this would go to the other. Just wanted to throw that in as you guys, I think it's a really useful way of holding the integrity while still giving some specificity of what that looks like.
Perfect, thank you. I saw my vote and Chair Moss's vote. I feel like I've lost Member Straight and Member Bogus.
No, I'm here. And
Oh,
I voted already, but I took it down when the
were
hands
you a yes?
Well, I mean, yes, I have my number on my.
Okay, and Member Bogus is opposed. That passes with Member Bogus opposed. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, at your direction, may we go to the digital teaching and learning one? Where,
Yes.
you know, staff are having to jump back and forth
Yes.
between committee meetings, and they've
Mhm.
requested to have this moved out, so we could find the digital teaching. I think it's the last one, so maybe second to last. There you go. Thanks, Cammie.
Okay, does anyone have questions on this one? Could you scroll up a tad, Cammie?
Madam Chair, may I
Yes,
add
please.
some- See, I think this is the decision point here for you as the finance committee, whether you want to make a recommendation to the board here. That question is an actionable question, right? So given wide adoption of digital teaching and learning methodologies during the pandemic, should this program shift from providing adoption incentives to incentives to program maintenance funding? So I think that is the question itself is asking you for, do you support that? Or, maybe there's some kind of modification. Do you absolutely recommend that the board not support anything like that? Given the effort that the staff made to provide you with the information and background behind this is the decision point that I think the legislature wants to see the board take is, well, how do you answer that question? What would you like to see as the board, right? Is that fair for me to say, Madam Chair?
Yes, and my question is, if we're putting the funds into adoption and updating, who is paying for the maintenance? The LEAs?
That might be a question for Mr. Hauber from the LEA perspective, if he knows, or maybe our program manager. Anyone?
So Chair, if you want me to respond. Yeah,
Yes,
so
yes.
yeah, so the digital teaching and learning funds will leverage us into a purchasing cycle. And then it does come into the LEA's responsibility to then carry those costs into the future. COVID, with some of the federal responses, accelerated that for us. And we may find a couple of LEAs that overstretched themselves in making more technology available, more systems available, but at a higher rate than you could sustain thereafter. So we're all kind of looking deep into our pockets to figure out how to support that. But that's COVID, and that's not digital teaching and learning, but we do have that responsibility to carry it thereafter.
I have another question for you, but Chair Moss has his hand up, so let's go there first.
Just a question. You might remember, Vice Chair Davis, we addressed this in part coming out of reports and requirements and requested an adjustment, which was accepted by the legislature, on a shift in the application process from adoption to something resembling maintenance or ongoing support. And I'm trying to pull that up in my in my background from reports and requirements, but we had a similar version of this discussion. It was just more on the front end where we said, okay, you don't have to, act like you're starting over. Tell us now how you're keeping it up. Does that seem, I'm looking it up, but maybe some of those on or including Vice Chair Davis?
My memory could be not serving me well, but in my memory, we changed the reporting requirements to to how are you continuing this, not
Right.
the funding qualifications. The funding qualifications now is kind of incentivizing adopting current technologies. I guess my question to Mr. Haber is, can all the LEA, you say a couple are overstretched now. Are the majority of LEAs able to maintain this once they use these new monies to stay current? Because I've heard this over and over that monies will be offered for certain technologies, but then they don't have the support personnel, or they get the software, but they don't have the hardware, or vice versa. And it just doesn't make as much sense as it could. Does anything need to be changed to this grant to make more sense financially?
Right. I think the scope of the grant allows all of those activities to happen, and it comes down to planning at the LEA level. So, for example, in Granite, we had a couple of seasons, a couple of years where technology, hotspots, Canvas, and other systems were purchased, but then we moved off of that, and we're more focused on the teachers accessing that information, being proficient, and providing training. So we just, of a natural course of action, moved so that the dollars that we use today are more on the training side than they are on acquiring systems and hardware. So the grant itself is broad enough that you can manage those different needs.
You would recommend no changes.
Being able to advance into future technologies is always attractive, and AI has definitely got our attention right now.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no hands, let's move on to the next one. Did I miss, our staff was not recommending changes to this currently, correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
let's.
So that's a decision point in itself too. Do you, as the finance committee, want to recommend to the board that the board communicate to the legislature that it's your recommendation that there be no changes? I mean, I think the legislature would really appreciate that. It shows that the board, is informed and, program by program is doing that. So
Yeah,
you don't have to. I'm just offering
I think
that
it would
out.
be good. We'll entertain a motion of that nature or another. I've got two hands up. So Chair Moss.
I think Brent hasn't spoken. I can wait. I've got a question. Unless
Okay.
he's got a motion, I can put my question in before if he's.
Well, you had your hand up first, so go ahead
All
and ask
right,
your
I'll go
question, and
ahead.
then we'll go to Brent. He may have a motion.
Okay. So my question is just the technical part. I looked up the funding. It was I looked up the reporting. The change we made was just for LEAs to report progress toward their goals rather than having to provide initiation type of goals. So it was of the same nature, but just reporting. Yeah, like you said, it wasn't funding. So my question is just exactly what we're after here. Would this be, and is the possibility that the legislature is looking at, shift from providing adoption incentives to providing maintenance funding? I'm still a little bit unclear what that would look like. Is it currently coming with strings attached that they only give it to them if they adopt certain things spelled out in the grant application? Are things that are new technology or new uses of technology allowed or not allowed? What pragmatically would be the shift if we did what this says? Shift from providing adoption incentives to maintenance funding. I'm just still unclear what that means as a practical, nitty-gritty application question.
There's someone that could answer that question. It sounded like Mr. Haber said that the grant is broad enough actually to do both. So I'm not sure why they're recommending it, but we have Mr. Gaisford.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. What are they looking at here at the legislature?
This is Rick Gaisford, the Education Technology Specialist here at the State Board of Education, and one of the team members that helps to oversee this grant. I had a little bit of a question as well as to what that exactly means. My understanding is that they, from previous legislative committee meetings and that they were considering moving this funding to the WPU. And that's why our response is so much to no, is because there's so many things that require technology to continue to move forward and new things that are happening, that we really feel that this is not the time to be thinking about that this funding is very much needed by the districts. And that's what they tell me, is that almost universally how important this funding is to them, to both innovate and adopt new technologies such as AI that is coming into the system, but also in maintaining maintaining those systems and refreshing devices and all of that. And so they really need to have those funds dedicated to them. So our recommendation is to not make any changes, but to continue this program as a separate funding item because of the compelling need that the LEAs have all expressed to me to make this how important this program is to them.
Thank you. Member Straight.
Yes, as I look at the description, the overview, technology is constantly moving in many different directions. There's the technology. This gives funds to get the technology. Then there's the professional learning that goes with that. Is so dynamic. So I don't think anything's changed. So I think I disagree a little bit with the idea, given the wide adoption of digital teaching and learning methodologies during the COVID-19, I realized that forced us and pushed us forward to adoption and creation of effective learning strategies for students. But I think it's changing so often and so quickly that I think we're still in the same place as we were during and before the pandemic. So my suggestion is to move forward as the program is currently instituted. I think the overview explains.
Do you have a motion?
That. Yeah, let's see. How can we make continuation? I move that we continue current implementation of the digital teaching and learning program.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor that the committee recommends, that the board recommends that the legislature continue the digital teaching and learning program as a separate funding item. Discussion to the motion, Chair Moss.
I support it. I think we can also explain to the legislature that we have adjusted between the reporting thing that we adjusted, which was a shift from initiation to maintenance, adoption of new strategies, and what we're doing internally. I think what they're looking for from us is probably to say, have you adjusted to the fact that most schools have taken this in and the changes are there? But it sounds like we can make a pretty good case that we're sort of addressing the concern they've raised, including by legislation. So I support it. I don't think that needs to be part of the motion, but it can probably be part of our explanation.
Thank you. Members, please vote. Let's go to the, that passes with Member Boggess opposed. Deputy Superintendent Jones, let's go to the next one, if you will.
Deputy Jones, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, the next one is the early literacy program. So we're going back up and so we're back in order now. Thank you.
Sorry, sir, you want me to go back to the top?
Okay, right. Yeah, go back to the top. So we did the Title I. We did, yeah, go back to where we were before we jump down to the digital teaching lab. Sorry. So we did. Yeah, we did Title One. My understanding is we covered elementary school counselor program. There was a motion on that one. And yeah, so now we're on, I'm sorry, yeah, not early literacy. Now we're on pupil transportation, rural school reimbursement. And I'll speak to this one just real quickly and in the interest of time. So there's two LEAs that benefit from this program. Sam, and I think Ron might be on here, and they can correct me if I'm wrong. It's San Juan School District and Pinnacle Charter School, or is it Pinnacle, or did I say the right charter school?
Pinnacle Canyon Academy. Yep.
Yeah, Pinnacle Canyon Academy. They from my perspective, San Juan was one of our LEAs that I feel that they took when the code was changed to say each LEA shall receive 85%. San Juan I think took a pretty big hit. So I wouldn't recommend doing away with this if it's going to mean that the funding goes away for San Juan, right? I mean, they've got quite extensive transportation operations. I'm not saying that other districts don't either, but I would just ask to consider that aspect of it too. I think it's just as important for Pinnacle Canyon Academy as well. Based on where they're located, the remoteness, and trying to get the students or families that elect for their kids to go to Pinnacle Canyon Academy, back and forth from all the, remote type locations that are down in that geographical. And then, ma'am, if you'll recognize Director Yuri for any additional input to this particular program, please.
Director Yuri, then Chair Moss after Director Yuri. Go ahead, Director Yuri.
Yeah, Sam Yuri, School Finance Director. I do want to excuse Ron Litchfield, our Pupil Transportation Director. He is on a flight to the National Transportation Directors Association meetings in Washington, D.C. this week. So I wanted to excuse him. He's a member of that board and a very respected member of that community. Again, I recognize the benefit to reducing administrative burdens somewhat, but these two LEAs would be really negatively impacted if this were to, for example, be moved into the flexible allocation. And so it would be tough for me to recommend doing anything that wouldn't quote unquote hold these LEAs harmless. But don't have anything else to add at the moment, so we can go to Chair Moss's question.
Okay, I'm just going to throw something in really quickly. If this is, if these are the only two that are qualifying, that's one thing. But if they're the only two that are applying because they have to be remote to meet certain expectations, if we do keep this, we should advocate to the legislature to change the name to a remote LEA and not rural. My city is a suburb and we just got rural designation because we went under 10,000. So anyway, Chair Moss.
Well, somewhat similar question. I'm just curious how many students this is serving. I assume Pinnacle Canyon, I think they're in Price, if I remember right. Do we know how many kids are benefiting from this at the two LEAs that use it?
I don't know.
Chair Moss, I will just give me a few seconds and I'll pull that up. I think Ron probably knows that off the top of his head, but
while you're pulling that up, can we go to Member Bogus and then we'll circle back to this question again?
I can wait, ma'am. It's either way.
Let's go ahead and have you, just in the interest of time, Christina, and then we'll circle back. Did you have a question, Christina?
Oh, yes. Thank you, ma'am. I'm so sorry. So, okay. I actually would like to piggyback off of your comment. There are states with parameters that define what rural means. And everything from the population of the community in which the building resides or the district office resides to the number of miles a student would have to travel once they become ineligible for student transportation. So for example, if you're eligible for a school permit and you travel more than, let's say 20 miles to your school building, there are parameters. And so I have a manifold question. One would be, do we have something like that in the state of Utah, or do we need to create something? And if we have something, do we need to look at that language so that our rural schools are more, I don't know if I'm articulating that well, but so that we protect them, so that this doesn't come up again. Did I articulate that in a manner that can result in an answer?
Well, I think you're asking, how are we defining rural in relation to applying for these funds? Is that what you're asking, Member Bogus?
Yes, or in general.
Yeah. Is there a general definition we're using for this application?
Chair Norton, if I may.
Please.
So this specific grant actually additionally requires very high free and reduced price lunch counts, so economically disadvantaged counts. And I think it may be more accurate to say something like a rural or remote program combined with that economically disadvantaged element to it. We've been looking at a variety of definitions for remote and rural. There is a NCES designation of different codes that they use for remote and rural, and we have there's a code 43 that is the most remote based on those definitions, but it is in statute defined right now as an eligible LEA is located in the 4th, 5th, or 6th class county, and then 65% of the students enrolled in the school district or charter school qualify for free or reduced price lunch. So I think that's really the extent of the rural is just the county classification right now. So if that's helpful to the question there.
So depending on the grant, they can use the different classifications to really target the type of grant that they want. So we don't necessarily need to change this to remote. It would just be they are using classifications to limit who can apply.
Right. And the big piece there, right, is the very high 65% of economically disadvantaged students, because there's a lot of LEAs that fall into that 4th, 5th, and 6th class classification, but only these two are the ones that qualify with the high poverty counts. So,
okay, thank you, Chair Moss.
I just wonder whether we might recommend reconsidering the criteria that's in code. It sounds like from what Member Bogus is suggesting and what I'm hearing from Sam, there might be other ways to get at this. I don't want to take it away from those that are getting it, but do we want to recommend that we look at that? Is 65% of school lunch the right criteria to use to address the cost of remote transportation? Just throwing it out there. Anybody think we might want to recommend a review? Maybe not.
I would support that.
So the motion is on the floor that the committee recommends, that the board recommends to the legislature a review of criteria for the pupil transportation rural school reimbursement.
Sounds right to me.
Seeing no hands, members, please vote.
Chair or Vice Chair Davis, I do have a question for Director Uri, if I may.
Please.
Director Uri, would that allow you to do what you need to do while keeping this in those two districts, or are we going to open up a can of worms that we regret later?
Board Member Bogus, just is the question allowing us to review the criteria? Is that, am I understanding your question there correctly?
Yes, I want to ensure that our genuinely remote and rural, and there's a lot of that, but there's gradation of it in this state, but that we're not going to open up ourselves to a place where schools lose things because we opened a box we should have left closed.
Right. No, and I appreciate that concern. I think anytime you look at different criteria, you might affect eligibility one way or another. So I don't think that the motion, as far as recommending a review of the criteria, necessarily, would negatively affect someone one way or another. But we could maybe have a better idea of who's on that borderline. You know what I mean? And where those, I can think of a lot of remote districts, but I off the top of my head, I don't know their free and reduced price lunch counts, and those sorts of things. So again, I don't necessarily see a huge issue just reviewing the criteria as the motion states right now.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Why are we asking them to review the criteria? Why don't we review the criteria and see, is this really appropriate? Is San Juan and Pinnacle, are they true anomalies in the system that warrant this extra funding because of all things considered? Or are there actually a handful of very remote schools that may be just off one statistic or another that really could benefit from some transportation funds? I mean, why don't we tell the legislature that we are working on this and just to hold for a month? I mean, can we do that? Member Straight.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to suggest that, within this review of the criteria, I guess I just need a little more clarification. Does this mean we're going to, so we already have counties of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th class. So we have that element. We have the free and reduced lunch. Were we going to, as part of our review, are we going to look at these 3rd, 4th, and 5th counties and then lower the free and reduced lunch number? What exactly are we trying to find out? Or are we going to do a range of different and try and, well, because in the end, as we drop that number, it's going to increase cost. But that is the information I want to see. But what kind of need is there really out there? My experience tells me from because the transportation issue has always been such an important topic, and we've asked for changes to that every year for everyone. But in these reimbursements of transportation, these specific counties that have certain levels of poverty, I mean, there are several other counties I can think of that would definitely fit in with this. We just changed the percentage of free and reduced lunch. Anyway, I've spoken enough, but I agree with Chair Davis in that we need to look at this, and then we can make a recommendation.
Thank you, Chair Moss.
Yeah, I guess just for clarity, are these requirements currently in code that it has to be at the 4th, 5th, or 6th class and have 65%? Okay, so I see Sam nodding. So I guess the idea would be we would recommend changes to code after having reviewed. And my purpose of my motion, I guess, following up on Member Bogus is, it sounds like we might just take a look at whether these criteria are the best at zeroing in on those districts that need or charters that need funding due to their remoteness. It's sort of an approximation if you're in that particular county and have high school or free and reduced lunch, but are those the best? Do they really get at the evaluation of the program? It sounds like that might benefit from us taking a look. And so I would agree that the idea would be we could recommend at the board that we look at it, and then based on what we think, we might recommend additional changes to code, but keep it in our, that we're trying to do our internal review and pass on what we know and think to the legislature. So I don't know if that we need to change the motion, but I concur with where you're going there, right, Vice Chair Davis?
Could you change the motion to say that the committee directs staff to gather information about this line item and other schools that may qualify? Honestly, what I'm really looking for, and if we have time to look at this next month, I just want to give me a point chart.
Yeah.
Give me a point plot and let me know what are the themes that put San Juan and Pinnacle, what makes them anomalies, that they truly need this. If we got a bunch of dots in the same area, we probably can get rid of this line item. But if they really need this special thing, then we got to consider that.
Yeah, I would think maybe gather information regarding the criteria and qualification of LEAs. Criteria and qualification of LEAs. That goes
and others who may qualify but just aren't applying.
That's what I mean. I think LEAs is falling with that. Yeah. What are the criteria and how are these two, and are there others? That's I think the idea, right? So that language looks good to me.
Okay. Director Uri.
Well, it's not others outside of LEAs. It's just LEAs, but it might be other than those two, right?
Yeah.
So
Director Uri.
I think that gets it.
Yeah, the point maybe I would make is that this is only $500,000 right now. And so if we are looking at expanding the criteria at all, we would probably want to or need to look at, increasing that allocation. And so, I really at this current point in time that my best information is that it really is the combination of the the poverty levels and the remoteness that really are the important points of this specific line item. But anyway, just wanted to keep that in mind as we move forward here.
To be clear, I am not interested in increasing this line item. I am interested in finding out if there is a strong, compelling reason not to recommend that it be rolled into a flexible allocation. If there are like 10 or 15 schools that could actually meet this same criteria and just aren't applying or whatever, then I say we roll it into the flexible allocation. But if these couple of LEAs have real extreme anomaly circumstances, I would love to know that compared to others.
Right. To my knowledge, at the current time, there aren't other LEAs that would qualify, but we're happy to look into that and make sure. So,
by pretty extensive amounts. I mean, like the next people who would qualify are far away. Like these two just have extreme need.
I'm not sure if there's a couple LEAs at 63% free and reduced lunch, or if they're more like 49%. I again don't know that off the top of my head, but
okay. With that new information, Chair Moss, do you want to continue with your motion?
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that's like, I think the idea here is we're looking at the criteria and qualification. How do these two, and are there others that are right on the bubble? That's consistent with where I thought we needed to go, just kind of see what it is that brought it to the point where just these two are getting it. And
okay, there's a motion on the floor that the committee directs staff to gather information regarding the criteria and qualification of LEAs for the public transportation rural school reimbursement. Members, please vote.
Chair Davis, I am a yes.
Thank you. Looks like that passes unanimously. Let's move to the next one. And I will just say, I'd like to preserve the last half an hour, just at least strictly for our information items. So let's continue to move through these. And then our final action item after this.
So this one, if I may, Madam Chair, just to tee this one up. Here too is, the question, it's the second question, what other mechanisms can be used to increase teacher eligibility? Can we scroll down a little bit? So, and my interest too is to hear from Board Member Straight. Because, sir, you brought this up, about incentive programs for the teachers and to see if there's anything here that we might be able to further your, questions or your intent along that line, just to see, if there's anything we can do, right? Additionally for teachers, so.
Thank you.
And staff are ready to, if you scroll down even further, you can see staff answer the question, how consistently have individual teachers in Title I schools received the bonus? And I think there's one more, no, that's it. Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, pending any proposed actions, ma'am?
I have a question. These bulleted questions were questions posed by the LFA. Do we need to be making motions that this information prepared by staff be given to the LFA in addition to our recommendations?
No, not necessarily. Because this information is now public, as part of this process.
Okay, so they can just have the information.
Right, yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. Seeing no hands, let's move to the next one.
Okay, if you'll recognize Director Yuri, this is the overall, this is the to and from, obviously different from the grant. It's fine. You'll recognize Director Yuri.
Director Yuri.
Yes, as you know, this is part of the board priority here. Our additional $32 million request, along with our request to make some of that flexible to go over and above the hard 85% cap. Happy to answer any specific questions here.
And I don't know if I can get the votes for this, but I would move that the committee asks the board to ask the legislature to fund transportation at 100%. And I'll speak to it because I see no other hands. And that is because even if you fund the operation at 100%, the districts are still contributing much more than 15% currently because they have to pay all of the hard costs. They have to pay for all the buses. They have to pay for the busing garage. They have to pay for so many things. They have to pay for all the busing field trips. I mean, literally, they're mandated to get these kids to and from school, but there's only an 85% allocation, so it's an underfunded mandate. And even that isn't even 85% of the total cost of transporting students. So I move that the board asks the legislature to fund transportation at 100%, not including the hard costs, which the LEAs are already having to fund out of their own instructional dollars. Chair Moss, poke holes in that.
Well, I'm just curious whether this is different. I can't recall. I know we have a transportation item in our priorities list, and I wonder if this would be a change from that. I can't recall. Does somebody know? Maybe Deputy Jones knows what we've.
Deputy Jones?
Well, I've got it somewhere here.
Or Director Yuri or Director Frost or anybody.
It would be a change to include that language for the 100%. And you may want to use the language 100% of eligible costs. That's kind of the framework that we've been operating under that you explained well, Member Davis. As you said, the school bus purchases themselves are not part of those. And so the eligible costs are those to from school, we have that formula of miles and minutes. So it does not include activity miles. It does not include bus purchases and things like that.
Thank you. There is also a note from Chief of Staff Young that just a reminder that we are also working on efficiency incentives for some LEAs.
Right. That was the statutory change that I mentioned that would kind of allow us to reintroduce some efficiency measures.
Yeah, I hope we build in some flexibility into those efficiency measures, because some strange, nonsensical decisions can be made in order to meet criteria for efficiency. I'm all for doing it, but if we build in a bit of flexibility for like dangerous scenarios and such. Member Bogus?
Yes, ma'am. Could you guys help, or maybe Director Uri, just jog my memory and give me an example of an efficiency measure? I think I recall. I just want to make certain my recollection is sound.
So you're looking at bus routes and efficiency and what we call miles, eligible miles and minutes. So making sure that route is efficient both in, the geographical route that it's taking and the minutes, the bus driver costs, things like that. Hope that helps, Member Bogus.
It does. May I follow up, Chair?
Yes.
I guess forgive the directness of the question. Is that micromanaging? Sometimes when you're in a rural area, the most efficient path is not necessarily the best path. I'm talking about everything from minimum maintenance roads to.
Sure.
I'm just wondering. Maybe it's out of line. I just am wondering. Thank you.
I guess if you look at it from, and it looks like Dale has his hand up here. If you look at it from the legislative perspective, this is a reimbursement program. We're technically kind of reimbursing them for the prior year's expenditures. And so you've got to have some measure of efficiency there. We don't, right? I think the legislature would want to avoid a program where they reimburse 100% of all costs, because then there's no incentive. LEAA could have more conscientious anyway, be more cognizant of taxpayer dollars, where LEAB just says we're going to have the Cadillac version of the bus and we're going to take our time and allow the bus driver to park this bus at our Taj Mahal of a bus garage. So it's kind of that. There are states that have higher percentages of reimbursement. So I do think that there are good things about an efficiency measure, but we do understand it's a pain point for districts to have, as Member Davis mentions, kind of an unfunded mandate in some ways, because they're not getting all those costs recovered, even with the 85%,
or even with 100% of eligible costs, that wouldn't pay for the Taj Mahal garage or the Cadillac bus. It would only pay for the taking extra minutes and not being efficient there. And
I don't want to imply any district is doing anything nefarious here, but
no,
just
I think you guys make a good case. There's certainly a need, especially if you ask for 100% of eligible costs to be covered, there's a need to couple that with efficiency models. Otherwise, there's no incentive to be efficient, really. Member Straight?
Yeah, I guess I think it's an important distinction, as has already been mentioned. For example, except for rural schools who need help with building new school buildings. For the most part, we stay out of that. Schools bond and they have local taxpayers help out with that. So bus garages, I think, fall in that category of the infrastructure of education. So yeah, I think eligible costs would be reasonable, and I support the 100% of eligible costs. Thank you.
And I'm going to change. Can I change my motion now that I've put it on the floor? Let's say this, without objection, I'm going to change my motion that the committee recommends, that the board recommends that the legislature create a timeline to fund transportation at 100% of eligible costs in light of new efficiency models. I don't see or hear any objection to those changes. Chair Moss?
I was looking through our list. We've assessed the cost at 32 million for the efficiency measures we proposed, which are for efficiency and autonomy. I just feel like we've already got our list in place, and we're ready to go up there, and we've already started a little bit talking to folks, and
that's why I changed it to the timeline because of your comment.
I get it. So it's a timeline that doesn't adjust what we're asking for this year. It just sort of starts the.
What we're asking for this year would start an overall look at how do we get to 100% funding.
Yeah. Okay. So
in light of efficiency models,
doesn't do anything about our currently fourth ranked 32 million, et cetera.
Correct.
So, okay, I got you.
It's just an initial step. Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am. I don't recall what my hand was raised for. It might be from before, and I apologize.
No problem. We'll circle back, but seeing no other hands, let's vote on this motion that the committee recommends, that the board recommends, that the legislature create a timeline to fund transportation at 100% of eligible costs in light of new efficiency models. Members, please vote. That passes unanimously. Let's move to the next one. Deputy Jones and Member Bogus, just cut in if I don't see your hand quickly, if you remember what you were needing.
So the next one is the at-risk student gang prevention and intervention. Included in annual enrollment growth and WPU value changes. There's really no outstanding issues or questions on the at-risk gang prevention and intervention. We just want to make sure, see the, if you noticed, I should have probably called the attention to you, but in the LFA's slides, they used a color coding in the over, right? Red, yellow, green. And so if you scroll down on this a little bit more, Cami, you can see that there's, really, I think this was more of an information item and that because on this one, you see the red there, right? For the digital teaching and learning. So, I recommend that the finance committee just treat this particular one, the gang prevention, as an information piece. I don't think there's any action that's necessary or consideration.
Okay.
And I don't think you did either.
Members, if you have questions that come up in the future, we can contact Deputy Jones and he'll direct us to the right folks. Let's move to the next one.
We did digital teaching and learning already, ma'am. And I think is that the last one, Cami, or is there one more?
I think that one's at the end. So I have a motion for the first one before we leave this agenda item. And
for the Title I paraeducators now.
Yeah, yes. Is Director Vandeventer still here by any chance? It's okay if she's not. I can do it without it. And we can alter it in the full board if we need to once she takes a look at it. My motion would be that the committee recommends the board to recommend that the legislature holds on a decision to move this out of the base budget until the growth is determined from new federal policies. I hope I said that right. I think that Director Vanderveer was saying that new federal policies could double or triple the numbers of these schools within the next year or two. And if that happens, these schools will be getting so little money, it's not going to make any of this worth it, and they should discontinue the item at that time. Or target a different kind of CSI funding that would actually be enough to make a difference for that many schools. But I don't think they should make a change. As it is right now, it is making a pretty good difference. 3 hours of aid time a day is a lot, surprisingly, because we have so few resources. So anyway, any discussion to the motion? Seeing no hands, members, please vote.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
While they're voting, we did not cover the early literacy yet. That is the last one. You
Oh,
skipped
okay.
Sorry.
So we have 2 yes votes and 1 no vote. Chair Moss, there's a motion on the table that the committee recommends, that the board recommends that the legislature holds on a decision to move this out of the base budget until the growth is determined from new federal policies. Director Vanderveer said in the next year or two, we could double or triple our CSI schools. And at that point, there will be so little money moving in that they should get rid of this line item. But
I apologize. What's the title?
this is the Title I para educators.
That's up front, the first one?
Yes. At this point, it is making a difference for those 30 CSI schools.
I can support that. Or can I hit my button? Right, there we go.
Okay, that passes with Member Bogus opposed. Let's look at early literacy. Deputy Jones.
So for this one, you can see the questions, how is the local match considered when appropriating state funding? How is that ratio for state to local funding changed? We provided, an answer to that. Scroll down, please. How does the program continue to support K-3 reading outcomes? And then recommendations for the program. I won't read it to you, but if the committee members will take a look at that, and then if you want to call on Director Gronston for additional input to this, I think that would be beneficial too.
So our staff is recommending that an option would be to move the funding to above the line with an earmark for K-3 literacy, similar to the at-risk enhancement program. So it basically would be weighted, if I'm hearing that right, a weighted WPU to ensure this funding continues to support early literacy specifically. Am I understanding that right?
That is my understanding. The Director Franzen, do you want to add to that or clarify?
We have coordinator Sarah Wibke on the call that would probably be the expert, and I can weigh in if needed, if that's okay, Deputy Jones.
Or Mr. Frost, you're welcome to from the
let's hear from Sarah Wibke, and let's hear from Todd Haber. I don't see Dale's hand up yet at this time, but we can come back to Dale as well. Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, Sarah Wibke, Literacy Coordinator for the Utah State Board of Education. As far as this recommendation, when we were sent the questions from PEA and then also Ed Interim had asked similar questions, we actually reached out to LEAs and said, how would this affect you? Because we can make a recommendation, but we really want to know what would be best for our LEAs. And so their recommendation was really around, because there isn't any growth included in it now, so it's been at stagnant for 15 million for a long time. And so they were just saying if we could still have growth, so above the line in the WPU, but still earmark it for early literacy, they would feel most comfortable with that option.
Thank you. Thanks, Coordinator Ribke. Todd Haber.
Thank you, Chair. I think we just have, from the BA's perspective, just one item of note, and that is that the rate is fixed in state statute, but we've had appreciating assessed valuations over those times, and that does take additional revenue from the locals that eats into our overall tax capacity. And so we'd appreciate some consideration of how that rate might get indexed or set in a way that the local contribution is staying in proportion to whatever the state funds are. Kind of the question too from the LFA, how's that match being worked? We as districts are putting more and more money in as assessed valuations grow.
So that's problematic because it's increasing the burden on the local fund and not increasing at a state level.
Give me a moment. I can pull up the data that shows what, if it was an inflation or if it was WPU. And Dale, maybe you have that, the finance team ran it, and it's significantly different of what I think it'd be around 23 to 24 million, and it's at 15 and has been, had it been in the WPU or been receiving inflation over the years.
Okay, Dale, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Davis. So there are really two issues. One is the mix of local to state funds, and the local funding has, grown significantly compared to the state funds. And it used to be more of a 1-to-1 kind of match, and now it's closer to 3-to-1 local to state. And so if you put it as a WPU, there's a question policymakers should put up is, does there need to be the local match? Or will locals continue to support their early literacy programs? Because I know the match requirements are both add administrative burden and reduce flexibility for school districts. And so there's the question on the local side. And then the other question is just how you would allocate the funds, at whatever level above the line. Like what would you weight, and those sort of questions.
Okay, and thank you. That's helpful. And if you've got that data that Director Thronson was talking about, that would be helpful. And before we go to Coordinator Wiebke, if I could ask our committee members, can someone out there be formulating a motion that looks at potentially moving this above the line and does something to address the fixed versus ever increasing local contribution? If you care about it, if not, I will try to formulate it on the fly when I get to that point. Director Wiebke?
Yes, as far as the funding comparisons that Jennifer and Dale were referencing, so with the current funding at 15 million, if we were including that in the WPU increase, it would be just over 23.1 million at this point. And if we were looking at just inflation alone, it would be over 19.5 million. And so definitely a significant difference there in the amount of money that we currently have in state funding.
Sorry, what was the inflation number?
19.5, just over 19.5 million.
That's really helpful. Thank you. That's pretty compelling. Director Thronson?
I was just going to encourage, if Sarah could speak to the recommendation. We presented to the legislature in September on this particular issue and provided a recommendation, but it has not gone through the board in terms of, we gave them some options and some pitfalls and benefits. And this might be a good time, Sarah, for the board to actually weigh in on what they would like the official recommendation to be in this space. So if you want to share.
Yeah, and Sarah, thank you, Director Thronson and Sarah. If this was the most preferred recommendation, then we'll just stick to this one. I don't think we need all the options unless another member does, but I have Chair Moss's hand up as well. Let's actually, Sarah, if you can wait, get Chair Moss's question, and then maybe you could address all of it. Chair Moss?
I think it was kind of where you were going. I was curious what the other options were that were thrown out and what the reaction was from the Hill or the panel that you presented to.
Thank you. Director Wiebke?
Sure. So when we pointed this out to LEAs, that there was a potential, I think at first were a little taken aback, thinking, oh no, is this money going to go away? We need this funding. So we're like, oh no, they're just looking at some potentials, potentially moving into WPU. And so we just simply asked them, what would that mean for your district or charter school? And so when they responded, they sort of sent a pros and cons list of, they appreciate the increase in flexibility of their funding if moving it to the WPU, which would sort of decrease some of their application burden and increase the amount over time and have that growth potential that they don't have right now. Some of the cons were the loss of that local matching funding. So kind of like what Todd was saying, not only keeping up with the percentages, but also really looking at wanting to keep that local match within the district. And they didn't want it to remove that earmark for early literacy. They really wanted it to stay there because they feel like it's such an important piece, especially now that we're sort of gaining traction in that space. They wanted to keep that momentum going and continue to improve outcomes. And so they appreciate that, and of course would remove that restriction on the use of funding. So while they all said, if it can move to the WPU, some of those pros are really excellent. But if moving it to WPU means removing the earmark, then they weren't really on board for that. So that's why the most popular outcome was really around, if we move to the WPU, it's sort of the best of both worlds because you get that flexibility, you get that growth, but you also get that earmark reserved for early literacy.
And then thank you, Coordinator Wiebke. And sorry, it's Wiebke. I've been saying Wiebke. It's Wiebke.
You're great. It is Wiebke.
Please accept my apology.
No
Circle back to Chair Moss, and then we'll go to Member Straight.
I'm just Sarah and Jennifer, was this a legislative panel that you presented to options? So I just didn't hear anything about what the legislative reaction was. I guess the locals didn't want to lose the match, although I'm not sure how that works when the match requires them to put money in. And the idea being when taxes go up, they have more to contribute, right? So if state funding goes down, I mean, that's kind of the idea. And so I'm not sure where they're coming from when they are concerned about losing state money, but they don't lose the overall because the local, that's the reason you lose state money, right? But they also didn't want to lose the match. So I'm not sure what that means. And I'm just not unclear what this legislature said, if they said anything about their take on a couple of those options. Sorry, but I think the reception on both sides is just kind of what I'm trying to get a feel for.
Sure. When presented, we didn't get any specific feedback or response from legislators when we were when we presented to, well, we didn't, but Scott did, to PEA. There wasn't a specific answer of this is what we want to do moving forward type of thing. And at interim, there also wasn't a recommendation chosen at the time.
Thank you. Gotcha.
If I may add, we met with Senator Milner and Senator Fillmore in preparation for that meeting, and Fillmore expressed that he was, he's really into putting it in the WPU, convinced me as to why we shouldn't. And so we spoke with him. We're like, it's been basically in the WPU. It's been said, here's some money, do what you want with it. And our outcomes are not any better than they were 10, 20 years ago. And so expressing that, yes, you could, return it to free funding, let them choose to use it for literacy or not. But what we've seen with SB 127 is when we've put some constraints on how those funds are used and what they can do in terms of evidence based and evidence-informed curriculum, and that they have to diagnose students' reading needs, we're already seeing an uptick in our outcomes. And so being able to say, yes, you have some flexibility with these funds, but they are still dedicated to literacy. It did seem in that meeting that they walked away with appreciation for that explanation, since we've had this program for over 15 years. So it didn't seem resistant at that point, but as Sarah said, in the actual interim, we did not get into like, we appreciate that recommendation, we'll forward that. They didn't take any motions or anything.
But it sounds like that recommendation would meet the concern that the funding would grow as needed. But to meet Senator Fillmore's concern, there would still be an earmark specifically for early literacy.
Yep. Yeah, it keeps that tailored, focused, and the way I see these kind of earmarked funds is we do value these things in our state. Dual language immersion it is above the line. For example, and BTS is one you talked about yesterday that we might seek being above the line. It says, what is Utah about? These are our kind of flagship programs. And the state has really invested a lot into literacy. And so keeping that investment clear with a clear line item is the recommendation.
Okay. I hope someone worked on a motion because we're getting short on time and we really have to move on to our info items. Well, actually, our next one, hopefully it'll be fast. Dale Frost.
So,
oh, you took your hand down, or go ahead.
I apologize, Chair. I wanted Chair Moss's question, I think, was about the local match and not the earmark on the state funding side. And I just wanted to clarify if there were any recommendations on the local match of local property taxes, because I think those are two separate issues.
That's what I've been grappling with my head the whole time we've been talking. So thank you for articulating that, because I'm not sure how to proceed there. Any members have any motions? Or staff have any recommended motion language? Director Thronson?
I put my hand down, but I am crafting one. So maybe we can start typing. I don't know who's the typer of the motions today.
So it sounds like that we do have requirements, because I like the requirements of this for K-3 for early literacy. I like those requirements, but we need to index those requirements to where it grows year over year. So I don't like the idea of just dumping it into the WPU unless there's also the requirement to use resources for this K-3 reading outcomes. Well, K-3 literacy in general. And in fact, I don't mind even attaching some requirements of match.
I would assume the earmark would keep the provisions of 127 in place. And and it may be okay also to keep the match, because I don't know if the legislature will want to do anything different than, but then the match, that's going to change also when you're increasing your state funds with inflation or WPU money. So I don't know how to mitigate that running amok. Anyone out there have motion language or suggested?
I sent some language to Cami. I'm assuming she is the orchestrator of this meeting. Is that accurate?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And within that, it is vague enough that we can deal with how do we handle the match, but it basically says hold the integrity of the K-3 literacy program, but include growth, or not growth, but the inflation and WPU increases, and we can work out the particulars of what that looks like to where we're not overburdening. But that match has equivalently been, $15 million from the state, $15 million from the LEA. So it's a substantial part of this program. And figuring out how to make sure that doesn't grow so much that LEAs can't keep up that match would be important.
Well, if it's growing with the WPU at the same rate, the LEA rate of money from the WPU is going to increase. So it's going to naturally increase as the other increases. We just want to maintain the integrity of what's going on with K through 3 literacy, because I think it matches up. I don't think there's an issue. If it's indexed, if it raises with the WPU, well, the WPU is also raising that same amount, and they have the funds to meet that demand, because there should be skin in the game on all sides. And it takes away a little flexibility with the WPU, but we're gaining what we need to in regards to accountability with K through 3 literacy, which is the most important literacy foundation. Anyway.
Can we adjust this language a bit that says the committee recommends that the board recommends that the legislature move the early literacy item into the WPU, maintaining the integrity of the K through 3 early literacy program with an earmark, period. And then get rid of all the rest of that, because it would inherently increase with growth and WPU increases. Now we got to figure out the local part. Todd Hauber.
Since I brought up the local issue, I guess I should have a solution for it.
It'd be helpful.
So one way to look at it is, so the match was through a levy, and it can be that the levy turns into a MOE. And so not unlike the CTE program where a calculation is run and you know what your MOE has to be, that would then fall to the LEA to manage the match, and we walk away from a levy. I don't know that that's the best solution, but it gets it a little more clean and can be tied to what the growth in the WPU may be from year to year.
Okay, will you think about how you would write that as a second part of this motion, Dale Frost?
Chair, I think maintaining the integrity of the K3 literacy program implies, some sort of match, but we could be more specific. I just had one request. Instead of saying the WPU, can we say the basic school program, which is the program made of WPUs? So it's clear. Yes. That's my only request. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So Dale is saying he thinks that match is kind of inherent in preserving or maintaining the integrity of the program, but do we need to move it away from the levy and into an MOE or suggest something of that nature? Todd, is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, and I don't know that it needs to be in the motion inherently. I think it's part of the discussion. As we try to implement this recommendation, these are the elements that we would have to address, one being the match. A match is required, and an appropriate match is still required, and it can be set at whatever the level needs to be. The mechanism of the match is under discussion, which could be a move from a levy to an MOE or some other concept that still drives a match.
So we don't want to recommend a maintenance of effort here in this motion. We just leave it like this, and the rest of the parts can be addressed later. Chair Moss, do you have thoughts?
I was just saying the same thing. There's a lot of math to do here, but this sets up the framework to chew on for the full board and gets us into the chance to look at the weeds and not figure that out right now. I like this language as it is.
Okay, great. Thank you. I move the committee recommends that the board recommends that the legislature move the early literacy item into the basic school program, maintaining the integrity of the K-3 early literacy program with an earmark. Seeing no hands, members, please vote. For Christina.
I see a yes.
Oh, yes. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. So let's move quickly to our next action item. And I'm just gonna tee it up really quickly. We do have some extra money and there has been an appropriate suggestion, I believe, that we use some of our money to fill a couple of the requests that we are sending to the legislature for one-time only endeavors. Deputy Superintendent Jones, can you
You
go from
summed it
there?
up perfectly, the advantage of this, and you'll see in your USDB meeting later that, you know, there's an update to their carry forward balance as well. Now that this is outside of your discretionary funds as well. And the benefit of this, if you choose to recommend it to the board and the board adopts it, is we can literally spend this money this fiscal year, not wait for the legislature to approve it and then wait till, you know, the beginning of FY25. So, and Deborah can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but we see advantages too. And then it also sends a clear message that we're always looking to resolve our own requests at the lowest level possible.
Absolutely. I loved this when I read it, Chair Moss, and I'll be looking for a quick motion at some point and then we can discuss. Chair Moss?
Yeah, just I echo Cindy's great idea. I love to see us being internally frugal and flexible and creative. Are there specific items, and maybe I'm just needing to look through this a little more, that you recommend we use it on?
It's in the recommended action.
Yeah, yes, sir. It's tier 2. It's
There we
number
go.
8 on your list. 1.7 million for the special education funding, and then number 11 on your priority.
Okay,
For
I hadn't seen it. If I could follow up, I guess, and this might be for Vice Chair Davis too. One of the things that we've talked about is this, you know, master teacher development stuff. We had teed that up as an ongoing. Would this exhaust the funding we have available, or do we want to think? I guess it would not. We could think about using a pilot internally to kickstart that item as well. I'm just throwing that out there for discussion, especially, I guess, to Cindy, who's been part of that. Do we want to
As a one-time only?
as a one-time pilot and then rolling it into ongoing from the legislature after we've done some internal spending to put it out there? 2.4, I think we had 2.4 million. That could be another one-time. Let's see, 1.2. We've got 4.2 accounted for.
I could support that, Jim. We had asked for ongoing, correct? Or had we asked for one time?
We asked for ongoing, so yeah.
So
it might not be strategically smart. My thought was we could kick it off with a one-time internal and then roll it into ongoing legislative, but I'm just throwing that out for strategic thought. What do you think?
I think we could, if we had enough to kind of divide it out over a 2-year pilot, because these like one-time funding over 2 years, because 1 year never gives us enough data, in my opinion, to be good.
So maybe we keep this ongoing. If the legislature tells us, no, the only way you'll get it is to make it one time, when we consider that as we go through the Hill process. I mean, this is 12th on the list. It's in our top whatever, but
I'd be okay to do it here and do exactly what you're suggesting. But Scott, do we have enough money to do that?
Yes.
Yeah, we do actually.
7.7 million. If you added it, the 7.7 million is enough to cover all three.
Yeah, if you want to just
that could cover part of this at least. Sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that, you know, I mean, I know you know this, but it is one-time money. So, you know, where you've requested ongoing for that, then yeah, if it doesn't get funded as ongoing, then, you know, we'd have to look at it at that time.
Yeah, so Jim, what it would do is limit the LEAs to a stipend rather than a salary adjustment. If you're fine with that, we can do it this way.
Let's withdraw. I think there's some reception to this that might make it worth keeping up there as a legislative ask and see if they make it one time.
Okay.
We could do something. Sorry, I just want to noodle that around.
Yeah.
I'll
always bring it back. You can always bring it back next month, and
okay. I'll hold.
Okay.
That's fine. Are you interested in making the motion, the recommended action?
Sure. I recommend the committee approve request that, okay, the committee recommends that the board, let's start that again. I move that the committee recommends that the board requests that the legislature allocate a portion of the 7.7 million unobligated agency carry forward for priority. Number 8, 1.7 million for the special education funding for LEAs. And number 11, 2.5 million for San Juan School District Tribal Student Network project maintenance.
Yeah, I have a quick question for Dr. Voorhees, and Member Bogus has a question as well. Dr. Voorhees, we had discussed this training being for one person per school, and it could be an aide or paraeducator in general ed or special ed. Is the wording special ed on this going to limit us? Do we need to adjust something here? This was the training for behavior supports, correct? Are you still with us, Dr. Voorhees? She might have logged into 2 meetings. Let's just go with it this way and we'll adjust it in full board if we need to make an amendment. Member Bogus?
Thank you, ma'am. Just clarifying that you can hear me.
Yes.
Awesome. So I do have concern that we're outside the board's top 10 and we made very deliberate and specific action to move in particular the BTS program into the top 10. I believe it ended up at number 8, which obviously maybe I'm wrong there. Regardless, I am concerned that we're outside the scope of the board's top 10. And then to me, I don't discount the importance of the network project, but is that the proper role of the education agency to install the infrastructure for internet protocols and that connectivity? To me, that's just not the proper role of our agency. And it bothers me that we're expending money that could be spent inside our schools on either literacy or numeracy or arts education. And instead we're outside the scope of our constitutional charge there. Does anyone else share those concerns?
Well, the last thing that you said is a philosophical preference. Just to address the first one though, the board rotates different years. Sometimes they vote to move top 12 to the legislature, and sometimes they vote to move top 10 to the legislature. This year for the upcoming 2024 session, the board voted to move top 12. And so what staff has done is taken out all of the ongoing requests and found one-time funding requests that could fit inside this $7 million. So this was more of a logistical preparation on what the board had already voted on. What are the feasible pieces? These are the 2 feasible pieces because everything else is ongoing. Philosophically, I would have said the same, honestly, but everything changed in COVID and now we're in this kind of hybrid learning stuff. And man, it's different now. And we had to do a lot to get broadband up and running for kids to access school. And so, yeah, I'm kind of with you there too. I assume people that are really in that philosophical category probably did not vote to put that in the top 12. Chair Moss, and then back to Member Bogus.
Yeah, just really quick. I think, the top 12 is what we present to the legislature. I think we're free to take our own money and do other things without violating the top 10. And so I see this as kind of picking the at the end of the scale there, that San Juan thing is number 12 and the LEA is number 9. That by absorbing those internally, it doesn't replace it. It kind of frees up other things to be legislative requests. So I don't think we're interfering. I think it's just a good, flexible, creative. And the other thing, again, I hope we can ease, back off from the broadband. That was an emergency. If we're going to fulfill our constitutional mission, educate, that felt very necessary at the time. But I do hope we're, finding creative ways. And I know that's been discussed to phase out of that. So I'm okay with both of these for now because they're internal and don't mess up our top 12 legislative asks.
Yeah, I get all these comments where everybody's coming from. Member Bogus.
Thank you, ma'am. I have concern that we're building infrastructure and using taxpayer dollars to build infrastructure that a corporate entity is going to end up using for profit. That's my struggle with this, is that it's really not our lane to fund private business as the State Board of Education. And so I don't know. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, and
Can we sell it? Can we sell it to them at the end of the day instead of just turning it over? I mean, I get her point. There might, we should have our investment protected and not have this be a windfall for private entities, right? Hopefully in some phase out, we do that or something like it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, quite frankly, if we move this on to the full board, I'd love to hear from superintendent and other board members or staff members that made that big trek to San Juan and really thought through this whole broadband situation and how much is education, what's happening. I think, Member Boggess, this is going to be actually, again, another good discussion in the full board. It already was before, but I think it could be resurfaced again with this suggestion. Chief of Staff Young.
Yes. So this is Chief of Staff Sarah Young. I'm happy to answer just kind of the high level question. So our goal is to be able to provide a bridge between the existing current solution that has been stood up by San Juan School District and the opportunity for private entities to come in and establish their own system separate from what the school district has had to take on as part of their response to the pandemic. So we're certainly not looking to subsidize any private entity. This money goes directly to San Juan School District to be able to support their existing infrastructure that the legislature chose to fund. And it's really necessary because there are no private solutions in the area that individual families can join. The last thing I'll just highlight is that this network expansion is specific to students and access to the school network. So all the filtering, all of the safe sites, all of the data privacy, that is all inherent in this system. So it is not a greater community system. It is truly about just making sure those students have access to the school-based network and resources associated with it.
That's actually really helpful. Thank you. There's a motion on the table that the committee recommends that the board request that the legislature reallocate a portion of the 7.7 million unobligated agency carry forward for priority number 8, 1.7 million special education funding for LEAs, and number 11, 2.5 million San Juan School District Tribal Student Network Project Maintenance. Members, please vote. That passes with Member Boggess opposed. Members, if you're okay, we're going to go till 12:20 and have a hard stop at 12:20. That's over what we have on our agenda item. We're going to take 5 minutes each for numbers 5, 6, 7, 8. Hopefully we get to the end. And I'm going to ask us to hold our questions till the end. And if there are some of these information items where we have significant questions, we'll ask them to be brought back again for another refresh next month. Is there any objection to doing this from staff or board members?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I recommend that we move 1.5.2 and 1.5. Well, so the 2 PMRs on USIMS and Utah grants we can do in December, both of them.
Okay.
And then I think you should see the progress update on the school finance dashboards that relates to the audit concerns from the OLAG that we're not visualizing all of our information. And I can cover the 1.5 real quick on the recognition piece. So, but we can move the PMRs on USIMS and Utah grants to next month. Also, the last item, the last information item, can be coupled with that resolution next month too, so we can move off of that one too.
Okay, so what do we need to do right now? What numbers? What agenda numbers?
1.5. 1.5, so just want to recognize the
5.1?
GFOA. Well, it's 1.5. Yeah, the GFOA number 5 GFOA financial statement awards for, this is just recognizing our LEAs for outstanding. Well, GFOA, the organization recognizes these districts, as having just excellent reporting and management and control of their funds. So any opportunity we get to recognize districts and charter schools for financial acumen, and effective management control of fund is want to take that opportunity, and that's what we're doing here. The next recognition, your direction, if John Palmer will turn his camera on. We also take opportunities to make sure we recognize excellence in our employees. This is just for evidence of how we go out and find the best and the brightest everywhere. John Palmer is certainly that. And you can see that they recognized, the National Center for Education Statistics recognized John for that. I know other employees have been recognized along this line, but John certainly is deserving of this award as well, or this recognition as well.
Congratulations, John. Thank you.
Yes. Next up is the 2023 Upstart Limited Review. So this limited review was done by the Office of the State Auditor. They had no findings. So essentially it's proof or evidence that we run excellence in programs. As you may know, the Upstart program was transferred by the legislature. So we're handing off a ran and excellent program, at the direction of the legislature. So kudos to our Upstart program managers and our financial managers for that program. It's always good when we move programs into other agencies to give them a clean and effective program. That concludes item number 5. May we go at your direction to showing you real quickly the a progress update on our school finance dashboard. That would also be Mr. Palmer, ma'am.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'm gonna I'll keep this very brief, and I think Scott alluded to it well. Basically, we were called by the legislature to modernize the data that we publish. Through that, we're going to build some dashboards. We've started this. We actually went out and hired a contractor to help us with this process. And I think I'll, due to time, I'll skip through a lot of the background here. But mainly, we want to put reports out there that our stakeholders can use. These here are kind of the 4 pillars of what we do on this team, and the financial transparency is definitely one of the big things we deal with on the day-to-day. So we can keep going through. Yeah, this just kind of shows what we have. So we've got budget information and then actual information. So actuals is kind of the historical accounting data. As we're building these dashboards, these are kind of our main audience that we keep in mind. It's a little bit of an art in finance to get a dashboard that's useful, but also understandable. So this is who we keep in mind. This group here, the finance committee, is one of our big stakeholders that we want to keep in mind. And that's actually one of the reasons I wanted to present here, just to see if there's anything that you as a committee would like to see in these dashboards. So as we build these, if there's something that is of interest to you, I want to make sure we get that in there and it's usable for you. Here's more of the design, kind of the questions in finance that we may consider as we build the dashboards here. So I'll let you go through that another time due to time here. We go to next one. So here, we've actually made quite a bit of progress. There are actually old views here, but here's some of the screenshots of the dashboard itself. Some of the things to point out, we'll have historical information for different accounts. Across the top, you can see a total, a per pupil, and a percent assets. So those are kind of different ways to look at the data. going through as a per pupil kind of puts everything in perspective and allows you to compare even big districts with charter or small districts and charter schools as well. So everything we do, we'll try and keep a similar feel and you know, have these options so you can see just total data per pupil or percent F. And this is just one of the many views. This is one element, the balance sheet. The balance sheet has assets, liabilities, and fund balance, like your carried forward amounts. If we can go to the next couple slides here, these are just different views. So this is a common size statement, and we'll definitely do some training on how to read these and you know, some of the features of Power BI as well in the future. So next slide. Yeah, there's just there's a couple. So if we could just maybe go to one of the end ones there. All of these visualizations you can expand, you can download, so you can kind of dive deeper into anything that you see here. So where will it be posted? So this is public information. There's nothing confidential in here. So this will be available just on the website. So internally through SharePoint or Teams, you'll actually be able to click to view it right away. So you actually hop right in from your chat in Teams to these dashboards, which I think is a pretty cool feature. Okay, next slide. And then when will it be published? So hopefully very soon. We are kind of reaching out for feedback with stakeholders right now. And then in the future, so we want to bring in student data, teacher data, and then we want to expand finance even more. So we'll bring in program specific reports. I know there was discussion today on transportation, for examples. Maybe we could have a full page just for transportation type expenses and just stuff of that nature. And then, yeah, this is so I'm at the top there. So if you have any questions, let me know. And if there's anything of particular interest to the committee, definitely let me know. We want to build these with our stakeholders in mind, and we definitely want to make sure to get you the information that you're looking for. And then, yeah, sorry to cruise through that, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, members. If you'll contact John, that would be great. This is awesome. It's going to be a great transparency tool for the public. So, and for us, useful for us. Thank you. Next one, Scott.
We don't need a motion, but you know, again, I recommend that we move 1.5.2 and 1.5.3. Those are information items on the deeper dive presentations on USIMS and Utah grants. So we'll plan on doing the deeper dives in your December meeting. You'll please recognize, Madam Chair, if you'll please recognize Sam Uri, Director Uri for 1.6. So he'll update us on that program code for expenditures from unrestricted funds. Relates to the conversation the board had yesterday on the rule. So go ahead, Sam.
Yes, so this code is 1299. And actually, if we can just pull up the agenda memo, that might be a little bit easier to look at. The other backup is just the list of program codes, and it shows that this code has been added. But the guidance from that code, which we've titled Special Education Expenditures from Unrestricted Funds, is that LEAs should use this code to report expenditures for special education costs from unrestricted non-special education fund sources to identify unmet special education needs. Expenses reported with this code will be counted towards special education maintenance of effort. It will kind of appear on our what we call our annual program report in the special education location. It will apply to maintenance of effort, or MOE as it's sometimes shortened to. So it does, it's not a requirement for LEAs, but LEAs choosing to use this code would be able to demonstrate need that's not being covered by state special ed funds. Happy
Thank
to
you.
answer questions.
We may
We
need
also
to
have
bring
some,
that we have some more people to talk about it.
well, just if there are questions, we understand the time constraints today, but
I think we might need to bring this one back because the big problem is going to be that no LEAs are going to want to use it because they're stressed out about MOE. And I don't know how to think outside the box to solve that problem, but maybe we can bring it back or maybe we don't bring it back, but we just talk about it offline and try to brainstorm some things. Okay, let's go to the next one. Thank you for letting us know.
All right, item number
Absolutely.
1.7 at your direction, ma'am. I'll cover this one. This is a perpetual agenda item where committee members can request additional data and information. There was an October request made by member Bogus. She requested data related to the BTS teachers. For example, the number of weekly preps, the number of yearly events. We have a backup document that we feel addresses or answers those questions. Madam Chair, I just recommend that if Board Member Bogus has any additional questions or needs further clarification on the document or what is provided in the document, that she can contact me directly. The September information request to be presented in October will move to November due to the time constraints we had in October. Specifically, Member Bogus requested follow-up and acknowledgement of any additional district or charter schools that received the GFOA Certificate of Achievement and Excellence. We did that in the recognition. Anytime we have those GFOA recognizes districts and or charter schools, we'll make sure to call that out. Ma'am, you requested that the Utah Grants PMR be added to an upcoming reports and requirements task force agenda. We've coordinated with Mr. Cannell to do just that to an upcoming agenda requirements. And then again, the finance committee members will receive a drill down or more extensive review of the Utah Grants PMR next month in December. Member Bogus asked for an update on the BYU data research project that is analyzing application that students use to ensure that the company providing those applications are following privacy laws. We're still working on that. What we by working on it is just really making sure scheduling time to know or get the update on where the vendor is at, or I'm sorry, where BYU is at in the research project in the process. So more to follow on that. I'm hoping that we'll be able to tie it all up and provide Board Member Bogus what she requested in the December Finance Committee meeting. So more to follow on that. I apologize. We just need to make sure we can get all the BYU data folks in the same room and make sure we know where precisely they're at with it all. So I'll pause there. That would be item number 1.7 in the follow-ups. Madam Chair, if you'll just check in with the Finance Committee members, see if we covered what they've requested so far. We know there's some additional to do and see if there's any additional items for data and information they'd like us to work on.
Chair?
She dropped off. Huh? Are you there, ma'am? Oh, I think you're muted. Chair Davis, I think.
I keep telling her she's muted. I'm muted. Go ahead, Member Bogus.
It's okay. I just didn't want to speak out of turn. I just wanted to clarify with Superintendent Jones. I did meet with Ms. Clough and Ms. Baevsky, and I did at that time ask for some follow-up and clarity on some of the things that are listed in your memo. Do I need to make a secondary request here, or
no, ma'am. No,
okay.
If you feel confident they'll follow up with you, we can just leave it in that lane if that's okay with you.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey.
Your direction, Chair, we can go to item number 1.8.
Yes, please.
Okay, this is progress and updates on the governor's recommendation for school construction. If you'll recall, the Finance Committee several months ago recommended to the board that we follow a specific timeline and that we do update you and provide this very item to you in your November meeting, which we've met that timeline. So with that, if you could recognize Director Yuri and or our school construction specialist, Dean Dykstra, they can show you that we feel like we've also met what the governor recommended to provide our LEAs and so
Great.
Director.
Yeah, Sam Uri, School Finance Director. Dean is here as well, and I want to recognize his hard work and collaboration with LEAs, with DFCM, with using his vast experience and knowledge to create these. These are available to the LEAs. We are formatting a few of those things, and we'll get those posted on the website very shortly. So just wanted to kind of point those out. Happy to answer any questions. We know it's a lot because one of those recommendations was a repository of different tools and resources for LEAs who are doing construction. There are some LEAs that do construction kind of ongoing, and some smaller LEAs that almost never do a construction project, or it's once every 20 years. And so Dean's put together a great resource here for everyone in kind of all of those categories combined. So again, some formatting, some making sure everything is ADA compliant and getting it posted to the website. But the content edits have been done, and want to really recognize Dean for while being new to the agency, using his excellent experience to get that done. So Dean, anything to add?
Dean,
Not
I
hearing
can't.
Dean's audio here.
Dean, you're muted. Did you have anything to add?
Oh,
I
maybe his
see.
microphone's not working. So anyway,
Okay.
we're happy to answer any board member questions.
Okay. And actually, I don't see no hands, which is lucky because we're 2 minutes past the hard stop of 12:20. But we just want to let you know, we appreciate all of you for participating today. Thank you. And we'll see you at 1 o'clock in our full board meeting. Thanks. That was a marathon right there at the end. We appreciate the clarity and the succinct report. So we'll see you in a bit. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.